IB Nation, everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll. Bill Bender's going to join us later. And Trev, we have a lot to talk about today because we are going to kind of put a final bow on this Notre Dame versus Navy matchup. Big one on Saturday. It's one of five, I believe, five top 25 matchups this weekend. And one of the more intriguing ones, in my opinion, because of the implications of you don't see in a lot of these matchups where both teams are necessarily in the college football playoff hunt, if we're being honest. I mean, and maybe potentially a win could vault some of those teams in there. But when you look at some of these matchups, Oregon versus Illinois, highly unlikely, Missouri, Alabama, those teams are both going to be in a tough spot getting in. Alabama could potentially get in. Missouri's in trouble. Texas, Vandy, great story, not a playoff team. LSU was Texas A&M. There's playoff implications for both teams. And the loser is not necessarily out in either case, because here's the great thing about that matchup. They're both undefeated in the SEC. They both have a loss, but both of their losses were out of conference. Notre Dame beat A&M, and then USC beat LSU. So that one is there. And then, of course, this one with Notre Dame and Navy, where both teams have a shot to make the college football playoff. Notre Dame is an at-large, and Navy potentially as the top group of five teams. So a lot at stake, Trevor. We broke it down the last couple days. Today, you and I are going to go over the keys to victory, and then we are going to make our score predictions. And then around 2:15 or so, Bill Bender will join me, and we're going to spend the next hour breaking down the big games from this weekend. He will have to get out a little bit early because he's got to interview a Hall of Famer today. So I'm a little hurt. So just because the Baseball Hall of Famer wants to meet with him, he's going to have to end the show a little bit early. That's what I said, man. I feel unloved. But it's going to be fun, man. This is going to be a great, great weekend of college football, in my opinion. And, of course, this game in East Rutherford, New Jersey at MetLife Stadium between number 12 Notre Dame and number 24 Navy is a big part of that. So let's, Trevor. Well, first of all, man, are you ready? You ready for this game, man? You ready for this show?
Man, listen, man, I don't care how old I get. I'm always giddy when it starts to approach game day. It's my favorite day of the week, and getting to do work with you guys and being around IB Nation just kind of helps scratch some of those itches, as much as I'm sure my wife loves to hear me talk about Notre Dame football ad nauseum. I'm sure that she doesn't mind a break from now and again. But I'm excited, man. This is a sneaky good slate of college football this weekend. It really is. It doesn't have that marquee, Georgia, Texas, Bama, Georgia thing, but it's a good weekend of college football. And I am happy that Notre Dame plays at noon because, one, I don't have to wait all day. I don't have that awkward, it's 1:15. Notre Dame doesn't play for 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I'm ready to go. And there's going to be some good football on for us to watch at the end of the day.
Just so y'all know, I'm preparing y'all now. This is going to be me and Trevor during a lot of the postgame show. No, I'm listening. I'm not watching the game. I swear. I'm listening to. That's going to be us on Saturday. I'm excited for it. So, without further ado, Trevor, let's get rocking and rolling. So, Irish fans, we're going to do keys to victory now, and we're going to start on offense. And for a lot of reasons, we start on offense. Number one, it's just kind of offense, defense, how we go. I'm an offensive guy. You're an offensive guy. Just how we're going to do it. But it's also kind of jokingly, but also because this side of this matchup is so important in this game. I mean, we've talked a lot about the Navy option and how they got to stop that and how different it is and do all these things. And so we're going to dive into the keys to victory. And you know what? Starting fast is not a key to victory this week, Trevor. Said no one ever. So that's key number one, right? Obviously, is starting fast. And it carries weight every week for different reasons. And this week, it's as important as it will ever be in a game, in my opinion, because of the way that Navy plays, but also because of the way Notre Dame plays. Because Notre Dame is also not a team that necessarily, but they're not a team that runs a ton of plays, Trevor. I mean, we've talked a lot about, where Navy ranks in plays. Notre Dame only ranks 91st in plays run. So these are two teams that don't get a lot of possessions every game. They tend to run the clock, and Notre Dame has been a team that does the long drive thing a little bit more than maybe we'd like. So possessions are likely going to be limited in this game. Neither one of these teams are high turnover teams, at least haven't been coming into this game. And so you're talking about a situation, Trevor, where you may only get 5, 6, at the most 7 possessions. You got to be kind of perfect when you're playing a team that can score the way that Navy does. And even with your defense as good as it is, if Navy gets 21 points, you might have to score on 60% of your drives to match, and they have to all be touchdowns to match that 21 points. And so that's sort of the bind that Navy puts you in, Trevor. So starting fast is huge for this week. There's some other reasons why, but that right there alone, Trev, is you are going to have to be as efficient as possible with your scores, and this is not the kind of team that you want to be coming back from or be falling behind from.
Yeah, absolutely. Navy and Notre Dame, from a turnover perspective, are both very efficient offenses. So they don't give the opposing team that they're going up against many opportunities to steal away possessions, right? In addition to starting fast, and I'm glad you touched on it, there's a lot of times where people hear start fast and they think about, all right, well, just come on, throw bombs. Now, again, would I be upset if that happened? I mean, no, like given the current state, but
Riley goes 75 over the top to Chris Mitchell on play one. I'm not going to be upset about that.
That's what I'm saying. If this is a Notre Dame 2015 USC start to the game, right, I will not be upset about that at all. We watch Chris Mitchell take the top off of defense. I would love that, but Notre Dame is a very rhythm-based offense, and they are once they get into a groove, they stick in that groove for a while. And it's at least for a quarter and a half. And in a game where you are going to have limited possessions against a team like Navy, it's imperative because you don't want to sit back and look at the box score. It's like, oh gosh, they had 6 drives, maybe 7, depending on like how if they defer, they receive to start the half. They might be able to steal a possession at the end of the game there and kind of go 2 for 1 sort of deal. But, in a game where Navy is really good at controlling time of possession because they have that ability, they just haven't had to because they're a very explosive offense. Notre Dame needs to make every single one count, and starting fast has to be top of mind.
Efficiency is huge. I still will go back to also, Trevor, the notion that confidence is still a big thing for this team. Like, it's still huge. They are still a team that when things start to go south, they tend to just snowball. We saw that on Saturday. This last Saturday against Georgia Tech, where they weren't necessarily rolling early, but once they kind of got hot, they were going, and then the minute they kind of started to sputter, they just sputtered for the rest of the game. We saw that against Louisville, where they start fast and then fumble happens, and then they just kind of sputter the rest of the game a little bit. Just kind of toy with Louisville for the rest of the game. When they come out fast, and again, fast being a good 3-4 possessions, they've tended to roll unless something bad happens. The Louisville game being an example, but against Stanford, they started fast, gained some confidence, and then just steamrolled Stanford for the rest of the game, right? Against Louisville, they started fast and really just took it to Louisville early in the game. The turnover obviously stunted those things a little bit. When this team gets going, they can be hard to stop, but they're also a team that, you stop them on, 2 or 3 of the first 4 possessions, and then 3 or 4 possessions, and then all of a sudden they kind of, they kind of start getting a little bit, we're not sure how this is going to go. This team is still one that has a little bit, in my opinion, of a fragile psyche on offense. I think the defense is fine. I mean, the defense has shown we can struggle early, and then we're going to figure out and shut you down, and you better score early. Because it's like if you don't score in the first quarter against Notre Dame, you're not scoring. I mean, that's kind of how it's gone with a lot of teams. You know what I mean? And, except maybe you might get a score in their backup defense. You know what I mean? I mean, Stanford scored in the first quarter, didn't score again. Georgia Tech scored in the first quarter, didn't score again until the Notre Dame put their backups in the game, and still needed a lot of plays to get there. You know what I mean? So, those are just that's been the thing. But this is not a team where you can fall behind and play. So that's why keys to victory, or number one, Trevor, is It's always start fast, but this week it is huge. Here's a key to starting fast, Trevor. And we spent a lot of time this week talking about the Navy run game. And it's really good. I mean, Trevor, it's the number 4 rushing team in the country in yards per game, right? It's the number, 6 team in the country in yards per carry. It's 6 yards per carry. But you know who's number 10 at just a 0.1 yards per game behind Navy? Notre Dame. And yes, Navy with their option is ranks 4th in the country in rushing yards. Notre Dame ranks 7th in the country in rushing yards on the season. 17th, excuse me. They rank 7th in games against Power 5 only teams this season. And when you look at this matchup, running the football is just as important as for Notre Dame as it is for Navy. I believe this is a game where, yes, we'll talk a little bit about the pass game, but this is a game where Notre Dame absolutely has to dominate on the ground. And they should, Trevor, when you consider what they're facing, because as you pointed out in your opponent preview article, and as I wrote about today as well at irishbreakdown.com, this is a Navy defense that is not good against the run. They rank 91st in the country. I think they were 92nd earlier in the week, but I wonder if the games that were played last night might have impacted that. Maybe they moved a spot, but they're 91st now. That may have been where they were. But when you look at their last 4 games, Trevor, they've given up 202.8 yards per game in their last 4 games. And that's not fueled by one team having like a huge performance against them. Memphis did run the ball on them, but everybody's run the ball on them in the last 4 games. And you look at the numbers, yes, they've run the ball well, but Memphis went for 274. UAB went for 192. Air Force went for 158. And Charlotte went for 187. And UAB's only had one other game where they rushed for anywhere close to that. That was against Alcorn State. They went for 192 against Navy. Their next highest against an FBS team is 119. UAB is not a good rushing team. Air Force has really struggled to run the football this year. They've had a couple games higher, but it's about on line with what their average is this season, where they got held to. And then you look at the Charlotte team, they had a 311-yard performance against East Carolina. There's 187 against Navy's their second best performance. Their next closest is 137. They've been held under 100 yards by 3 opponents, including Rice, North Carolina, and Gardner-Webb. This is not a good rushing defense. Notre Dame needs to take advantage and dominate this game. And honestly, Trevor, give Navy a little bit of their own medicine. Okay, we're going to come out and score fast. We're going to run the ball. We're going to control the clock. And our defense is going to stop you a couple times. And now you are going to have to get out of what you try to do defensive or offensively, because now you've got to play catch up against us. And we're able to go on an 8-play drive, 10-play drive, 12-play drive, because we're going to smack you in the mouth. We're going to push you off the ball. And oh, by the way, you may think you have us, and number 4 or number 24 or number 13 or number 20 or number 21, anyone that's on scholarship in our backfield can hammer Navy for a big play, or 22, all of them, but especially those top 2, Trev. So this is a big one for me. It's a statement moment for the Notre Dame offensive line, in my opinion, more than anything else. We know the backs can go off. Will they be able to win in the trenches against a small, undersized, but gritty, penetrating, great technique, defensive front 7 against Navy? That's going to be key. The Notre Dame offensive line has a chance to roll in this game, but will they do it? That's going to be a key to victory for Notre Dame.
Opening up the run game is going to allow Notre Dame to dictate the tempo of this football game from a whole, which is something that Navy does a really good job at, and what they've done a really good job at through their first 6 games of the season, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. It does rely on the offensive line. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have proven time and time again that if they just see a certain amount and enough carries, they will just break one of them because they're that explosive of a running back. To me, this conversation starts being geared towards having an efficient run game, being able to rip off 6, 7, 5, 4, 11, things like that. Now, again, in the same light of the passing game, I'm not going to be upset if they once again rip off another 50-yard touchdown run. We'll never be upset about that, right? But Notre Dame has the opportunity from a run game standpoint to really open it up against this Navy defense, because looking at their schedule, their last 3 games, Louisville, Stanford, and Georgia Tech all had relatively solid run defenses. They might not be ranked in the top 10 in terms of limiting yards per game, but they had a stout run defense. We all talked about what Stanford did to Clemson's rushing offense that was averaging over 220 yards a game going into the Stanford game. They rushed for like 150, I think, around that mark. So Notre Dame hasn't really faced a defense yet in this stretch where they've been able to open up the run game. And when they have had the ability to open up the run game, we see what that looks like. We saw what they did against Miami of Ohio and what they did against Purdue. So yes, as much as the pass game needs to be a factor, which I know we're going to get into discussing here in a little bit, the run game, it almost feels like the run game recently has been almost a complement to the Irish passing game. And they have the opportunity again to go out here and say, hey, listen, we're starting to open things up in the passing game. Don't forget, we still have 13, we still have 4, we have 24, 20, 21, 22. Anybody that we put in the backfield is going to be able to run an efficient game for us. So I agree. Running the football is an absolute must on Saturday.
I'm also very curious, Trevor, how Notre Dame utilizes Riley Leonard's legs in this game. Because I have a feeling that Navy is going to do what the last few teams have done and really gear their game plans toward stopping the backs. And does Notre Dame, like, they haven't really ran him a ton on designed runs in recent games. I mean, if you look at his numbers in recent games, I think in 2 of the games he's had over 10 carries. I think he had over 10 carries against Georgia Tech, but a lot of those were scrambles. And he didn't have a lot of designed runs outside of the goal line in short yardage.
Yeah.
Right? He had the 3rd and 1 conversion. He had the 4th down conversion, and he had 2 goal line runs. Outside of that, he didn't run the ball a ton. He had the 1 quarterback draw and then another quarterback counter. And then you look at the previous game against Stanford, he carried the ball 6 times. I think all but like 1 of those, maybe 2, was a scramble. They weren't designed runs. And then obviously he ran the ball a decent amount against Louisville. But Notre Dame's had a bye since then, and then he didn't do it. Is this a game where he kind of gets back to being more of a focal point because of how Navy defends Notre Dame or not? I mean, that's going to be another interesting part. Does Notre Dame use Riley Leonard as a counter to what Navy does, or do they try to then be proactive with Riley Leonard, do some designed quarterback runs in hopes of gashing Navy early, thinking that Navy, hey, we know they're going to crash. So we're going to do something with Riley Leonard early to try to get him to break a big run. Now you're on your heels. Then we counter with Jeremiah and Jadarian and those kind of guys. That's another potential option for Notre Dame in this game too, Trevor, is we're going to use Riley early, get Navy thinking, oh, shoot, this is a Riley Leonard game. And then next thing you know, they're doing some things with their running backs to take advantage of that, their play action to take advantage of that. I'm very curious how they're going to incorporate Riley into the run game this week, which we haven't seen them do as much in recent games.
Let me ask you this, because
especially with the bye coming up.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, especially with the bye coming up where he can rest.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So let me ask you this, because we've talked all week about how the clear, and this is the case for most weeks. This isn't just because it's Navy on Saturday, but Notre Dame has a very clear-cut advantage from an athletic and from a skill standpoint going into this matchup. Notre Dame has used a lot of 21 personnel in the past, but it hasn't necessarily been what we as fans thought it would be with 4 and 24 in the field at the same time. Do you think, in the spirit of kind of giving Navy a taste of their own medicine, we see a lot of 21 personnel with Jadarian and Aeneas on the field at the same time, or with 4 and 24 on the field at the same time? What do you think?
I love where your head's at right now. That would be such an FU move. We're going to put 2 backs. We're going to put 3 runners on the field against you. We're going to kind of give you a taste of your own medicine a little bit. I'd love to see 21 and 20 personnel in this game. We actually saw a little bit 20 against Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
20 personnel being 2 backs, 0 tight ends, 3 receivers. That would be, that would be very interesting to see. Very interesting. And again, it's not going to be your bread and butter. This is what we're doing all game.
Sure.
But something as a wrinkle, and then, do some things throwing the ball out of that, put Jeremiah outside, run your slot fade to him from there, do some things where you run some screens to him on the perimeter. You get him going on crossers. You know what I mean? Some things like that. Like that would be fascinating as you're in, heck, even doing RPO to him where you're running at the Jadarian. I'd love to see some stuff like that. I don't know that I would do like glances to him or, like an RPO with a now screen or a bubble, an RPO with a slot fade concept out of it, something like that with Jeremiah outside. Yeah. I mean, and we're seeing Mike Denbrock get a little bit more creative with different ways to get his tight ends and running backs the ball. We saw the couple screens against Stanford with the running back. We saw the screen concept to get Mitchell Evans the ball on a couple times. It would be really interesting to see how Notre Dame kind of gives Navy a little bit of okay, let's see how you like it. You know what I mean? Let's see how you like having to deal with all this kind of stuff with orbit motions and those type of things. And part of me says, like, Navy is a defense that's seen that a lot, but will they have seen that a lot from Notre Dame? And will they have seen that with the speed that the Notre Dame backs are going to put on the field?
That was my thought exactly. It's like they might have seen a little bit of misdirection. The play against Georgia Tech that got me thinking about that is they had a play where they faked a bubble screen and then ran like a halfback slip screen backside. And you do something like you line Jeremiah Love up in the slot, quick little fake RPO glance over at him. Then you have Jadarian Price with a backside screen set up there. It's just, again, in the spirit of doing anything that you can to get your playmakers in space, I'm all for seeing that on Saturday. It was one of those things where I thought, you know what, this is a game where the scales are really tipped in Notre Dame's favor from an athletic standpoint, and seeing just one of the, 20, 24, 4 in the backfield, just at some combo of that, I think would be really interesting to see.
And you look at the numbers last year, Trevor, the Notre Dame running back, the top 4 rushers for Notre Dame last year accounted for 24 rushing touchdowns. In 7 games, Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas Williams have combined for 21 touchdowns. So, and the thing is, we talk a lot about Jeremiah Love, how great he is, and he is. He is number 3 among the top 3 rushers in yards per carry at 6. But Jadarian's at 6'7", Riley's at 6'1", and Jeremiah's at 6'6". He's their number 1 rusher yards-wise, and he's number 1 in attempts, but he is number 3 in yards per attempt, which is not he's averaging 6 yards a carry.
I was about to say, man, like that is crazy to say that the third most efficient runner on Notre Dame's team is getting 6 yards a carry.
For context, Kyron Williams' best season at Notre Dame, he was at 5.3. And that was in 2020 with that great O-line. He was at 5.3. Your third guy this year is at 6.0. It's literally 6.00. Riley's at 6.08 and Jadarian's at 6.71. Aeneas is at 6.3. Kedron Young's at 5.8. I mean, so it's just like, it's freaking ridiculous how good this team is at running back. But the key, Trevor, is not them, right? The key is Anthony Knapp, Sam Pendleton, Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, Emil Wagner, Mitchell Evans, Eli Raridan, Cooper Flanagan. That's going to be the key. And we've seen it every single game. When the line blocks well, the running backs go off. I mean, there's a play here or play there, but there's not been a game this year where I'm like, line played really well, but them running backs were not hitting holes. And I've had this debate with people about the 2017 Georgia game. The Notre Dame offensive line played a lot better than people give it credit for. Yeah, but only rushed because Josh Adams wasn't hitting the holes that were there. I mean, there was a play, they ran like the G scheme, and if Josh Adams follows Mike McGlinchey outside, he might go. I mean, it was like, and he just pops it in, and you're like, what the heck? You know what I mean? That's not been the case with this group. If you give them room, they're going to go. We saw it against Georgia Tech last week. Second play of the game, I think, or second drive of the game. The safety comes down. He's in the hole. I got you, right? The kid with the dreads that you were talking about had played a really good game, and he did. He's right there in the hole. It's him and Jadarian barely moved and made him just whiff. right? Jadarian got him again early. The guy comes down in the hole. He's ready to tackle Jadarian at like 2 yards downfield. Jadarian's like, I juked you last time. This time I'm running over you. And it was like 23-yard gain, you know what I mean? Or 19-yard gain. And like you said, we haven't even seen Jeremiah Love go off the last few games. It's about time for him to kind of get going. So, but it all comes down to the boys up front. Can they give you room? Can they get a push against a defense that's going to be prepared to play against that? That's going to be the key. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame comes out and tries to take, a couple shots or throw the ball to back them off. But this is one of those games I'd like to see them come out right away and establish the ground game early and say, fellas, this is going to be a long day for you.
Yep.
And you've got a bye week next week to rest up O-line. I need you guys to give me everything you got, and I need you to play with a tenacity this game against this. So at the end of the day, no one's talking about their run game. They're all talking about our run game. That would be my message if I'm Joe Rudolph and Mike Denbrock this week, Trevor. It really would be. All right, let's keep it rolling, Trev, because we spent a lot of time on that one. Let's get to the next key to victory for the Notre Dame offense, and this is a big one, and this is going to be big for both sides of the ball. But offensively, Trevor, and I'll kick it over to you, third down efficiency is going to be key for this Notre Dame offense, who has largely not been good on third down this season. But, I'll just give you a little statistic here, Trevor. Notre Dame ranks relatively low. We showed about it yesterday in third down offense. But in their 2 games where they were over 50%, they've only been over 50% twice on third down all year. And do you know what their points per game average is just on offense points per game? Not even talking about defensive points per game. You know what their offensive points per game is in those 2 games? It's 54 points a game. Stanford and Purdue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I look at Notre Dame being successful on third down, I think it's a couple of things. One, you got to get yourself into more favorable third down situations, right? Notre Dame is like I said at the start of the show, a very rhythm-based offense. And they are one of those where if something gets off schedule, they start looking down the barrel at like a 2nd and 10. Then they kind of limp their way into getting into like a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. So you're kind of third and intermediate looking on, which I think is one of the reasons that get you as a football team into not favorable third down conversion percentages, right? So within third down efficiency, put yourself in a spot where you can be efficient on third down, right? Put yourself in a position where, and I'm not saying that every first down you gain 9 yards. Again, theme of today, not going to be upset if that happens, but just put yourself in a spot where you are putting yourself into a third and manageable, because keeping drives alive against this Navy football team with the way that they have the ability to eat the football. I understand whenever I brought that up, people bring it, well, they're not, that high in time of possession and they don't run that many plays. Like, well, it's because they haven't had to. But with the type of offense that they have the ability to grind out the clock. We've watched it in previous Notre Dame Navy games. So be very efficient with your offense in early downs. And once you do get into third and manageable, got to find a way to keep drives alive and keep the ball. You have to keep the ball as much as you can. If you're Notre Dame, be selfish with it. Make sure that the other team is not having any opportunities to try to steal any possessions late in the half, late in the quarter, because that's just going to mess up a lot of the rhythm. And the one thing that I like is third down efficiency, especially if the run game is kind of going at it like we thought and think that they will. I think that's going to help out that third down percentage as well.
Moving the chains, I mean, the hope is that they don't get into a lot of third downs.
Right.
And we've seen that before against Navy, where Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of third down opportunities. Last year, Notre Dame only had 7 third down opportunities. They converted 5 of them. I mean, that was very important. If you go back to the 2022 game, Notre Dame early in the game dominated on third down. Didn't get into a lot of them, but dominated. Second half, I think they converted 1. And that's when they sputtered and allowed Navy to get back in. I don't think they scored once in the second half. Wasn't it like 35-13 or something like that at halftime?
I think so.
And then the final score was like 35-32.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you couldn't move the chains. You got into yourself in some bad situations against that team. They were 53.9 in 2021 when they won 34-6. In 2019 when they dominated Navy. They went 4 of 9. A couple of those misses were in the second half. And so you've got to be good on third down, because if Notre Dame can be a big play offense, which I think they can be against Navy Trevor, and also moves the chains, that's how a route happens. You know what I mean? But I think early on, maybe if the big plays aren't coming, you've got to move the chains, because the more you convert first downs, the more chances you have to run plays. The more plays you run, the greater chances you have that Jeremiah Love rips one off, right? I mean, like the Stanford game's a perfect example, Trevor. Like, you go watch you look at Jeremiah Love's numbers in that game. He had 5 carries for 14 yards at one point in time. But what was his final number? 6 carries for 53 yards, 8.8 yards per carry. Why? Because he rips off a 39-yard touchdown run. You know what I mean? Like, they were stuffing him, touchdown. You look at the Georgia Tech game. I mean, the Texas A&M game. He had 2 runs that covered about 50 actually had 3 runs that covered. I think he had a 29-yard run, a 19-yard run, and a 21-yard touchdown run. So he had 69 yards on 3 carries. He finishes the game with 91 yards on 14 carries. A&M did a great job that game of stoning the run game. Boom, big play. Right? I mean, that's what we've been saying it every week. You don't have to be dominant with all 3 of these guys in the backfield. You don't. Just give them a crease, because if you get Love in space, in the 25-yard run he had against the 25-yard catch and run he had against Stanford, he got hit 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, Trevor. You know what I mean? Like, that's what these 2 kids do. Like, I think only a couple of their runs have been just clean. Josh Adams 2017 going right through the hole, nobody touches them. I think it's only been a couple of them that have been that way. I mean, the touchdown run against Northern Illinois, he hurdled someone. The touchdown run that Jadarian had against A&M, he had to make 2 guys miss in space. The touchdown run that Jeremiah had, he kind of broke 2 tackles as he's getting through the line, got there really tight. The Purdue was probably the one game where they just didn't get touched on a couple of those long runs. But even Jadarian's 7-yard touchdown, he's going to make a guy miss in the backfield. But, like, that's what they do, is, like, you get them in space against one defender. We've yet to see them play a team. Like, I said this to a Georgia Tech guy. Oh, the tackling was terrible. I was like, you know who else thinks their tackling is terrible against Notre Dame? Every team that they've played beforehand. You know what I mean? A&M's been a pretty good tackling team since the Notre Dame game.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why were they bad against Notre Dame? It's not because of them. It's because number 4 and number 24 make a lot of people look silly, right? So they're going to make big plays if you give them enough opportunities. But when Notre Dame's run game is sputtered, it's 3 and outs, 5 and outs, 6 and outs, where they're just not able to get those 2 backs into a rhythm. The line can't get into a rhythm, and they can't rip off the big plays. And that goes back to being good on third down. When you get there, move the chains, because the more plays you run, the more chance they're going to rip off big plays. Simple as that. And then the final one, Trevor, big plays in the passing game. If Notre Dame can hit a couple of big plays early in the throwing game, I don't think Navy has a chance, because that's the one thing this offense has not done. I think Notre Dame ranks in the bottom 10, I believe, in most passing plays of over 30 yards. They rank, actually, they're not quite as low as I thought. They're 113th. So there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's only 16 teams worse than them. I'm not going to mention that how excited I am that Michigan is tied for dead last, but that's a different conversation for a different day. I mean, Michigan's pass offense makes Notre Dame look like, BYU 1990. You know what I mean? But I kid. But when you look at this one, Trevor, I don't think Riley Leonard needs to throw for 350 yards. I mean, if he does, fine. I'll enjoy that 50-point victory.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have to do that this game. I really believe it's the dominant run game. But if he can come out early, be good on third down as a thrower, but then hit a couple big plays, and whether that's a go ball, post route, seam, or just getting the ball to somebody in space and then letting them go, I don't care what it is. If they can hit a couple big plays in the pass game and get that run game going, they're going to be good, because that's kind of what they did in 2022. against what was a Navy team that honestly did a pretty good job shutting down Notre Dame's run game, especially in the second half of that game. And so if Notre Dame can have some success, ran for 66 yards against Navy 2 years ago because they just said we're gonna load the box and stop the run. First half, Notre Dame hit some big plays, got it rolling, got a big lead, and even though they stunk in the second half, that was enough for them to put that game away too far away where Navy couldn't catch up.
Notre Dame's offense has the opportunity this week to kind of run up the box score a little bit. I personally, based on the way that Navy's defense is put together and based on the amount of athleticism that Notre Dame's offense has, I wouldn't be surprised if, you, me, Sean, and Vince are chilling in the postgame show talking about, man, they had minimum 3 runs of 20 plus and 3 plays through the air of 20 plus, just really honing in on this balanced offense that Mike Denbrock so desperately wants to get to, and that we've seen spurts. Stanford, they were about as balanced as you could have been from a total yardage output. I literally think it was 229 and 229. I think, or close to it. So
it was 229, and then Riley passed for 229.
Gotcha.
But they actually had, because Steve came in and hit a ball late, and
gotcha.
And they finished with 248.
Okay.
So Steve had a couple completions in that game as well. But you've got you're in your head, you've got it right, because that's where Riley was at. Riley was at 229 passing.
Okay.
And then the offense as a whole finished with 229 rushing, which is really
good deal. Good deal. Yeah. And we've all seen what Notre Dame looks like when they're able to run an offense like that. So big plays in the passing game. Again, this doesn't mean that every down you're running 4 verts at least once or twice in a series, right? But it's something where Notre Dame kind of, they almost kind of like teased the fans a little bit of, hey, we're starting to show that we're getting our guys out in space. Let them, in a game like this where they have such a clear athletic advantage, let them go out and eat in space, because they were able to do that against the Georgia Tech defense, who is more athletic than Navy's. So give them the opportunity to go make plays in space. That's one beautiful thing as a quarterback, is if you're able to throw a 10-yard drag route that ends up going for 45 yards, you just get 45 passing yards like that. Put yourself in favorable situations like that and let your playmakers go eat.
They have done some things the last few weeks throwing game wise, where I'm like, there's some stuff there off of that. Like, can I get a double move? Can I get, like a pump with I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, are you guys going to give us that at some point in time? You know what I mean? So there's stuff there. Mm-hmm. And as much as they throw the quick game, Navy could be susceptible to a, you know what I mean? Some kind of double move. I mean, you've completed about 10 slant or glance routes the last couple of weeks. Give me something. Even if it's like a slant with you send your running back out of the, like, that's something they could do, is like, with the 21 personnel, bang a slant, throw the slants backside and let a running back just kind of quick wheel around it. You pump the slant, let him get vertical, some slant and go. I mean, there's things that they can do. Stop and goes outside. I mean, they run a million stop routes and corners drive on it hard. If Notre Dame, well, here's the key. You got to protect it, right? Yeah. But if Notre Dame ran some kind of stop and go, it's going to score. I mean, just because they run so many stops and they don't do anything off of that. So this is a game for that, in my opinion. As long as because Navy's not they're a decent pass rushing team off pressure, but if you can protect the quarterback a little bit, I mean, you could do a 9-man protection in that situation.
Yeah. And
give me it off of a play action for all I care. Run it out of 12 personnel for all I care. You're going to get single high. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, Lauren and I, we were sitting on the couch watching, and I was explaining to her, I was like, Notre Dame is just, they are setting up the slant and go. I feel it. It was when they were running it out of that deuce personnel where they had the tight end on the left, lone receiver split out wide to the left. And a couple times Riley hit the backside slant. And I was every single time I watched it happen when they would line up in that formation, I just kept watching that safety on the left hash just kind of keep creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. And I was like, that is just begging for a, receiver plants on the outside foot, hits the slant hard. You run about 3-4 yards in, and then you're planting on your right foot and you're taking off up the field. You want to talk about an opportunity for Chris Mitchell to show why he came to South Bend. That's it right there. I mean, get him over the top. I mean, you catch a safety flat-footed. He's not able to flip his hips quick enough. I'm with you, man. There's a lot of things that it feels like is starting to be set up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I just, man, maybe it might be wishful thinking because to your point, it starts up front. Riley has to get at least a second longer of time for that play to develop. But man, it just feels like they're kind of planting the seeds for something. It
Yeah.
does.
Well, that's going to do it for the offensive show, Trevor. Folks, before we go to the defensive show, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And as always, make sure you are a member of our message board, our Champions Lounge at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I put a little recruiting intel up last night to check out, and you'll want to see that as well. A couple new names on the board, going to be some new visitors for Florida State. I think we should have an idea of a couple positions and how they're going to finalize here between now and then. So starting to heat up a little bit in what has been otherwise kind of a boring, non-eventful, recruiting cycle for Notre Dame. So we'll see how they can close. So you want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And Trevor, let's get to the defense. And this is an interesting one. And look, the first one is real simple, Trevor. When you're playing the Navy triple option, it's the first number one. It's actually, we have 7 keys to victory. The first one is be disciplined on the D line. Second one is be disciplined at linebacker. Third one is be disciplined at safety. Fourth one is be disciplined at corner. And then we'll get into the other 3 here later. But honestly, be disciplined. Discipline does not mean not aggressive. Discipline means whatever your job is, you've got to stick to your job, and you've got to do it fast, and you've got to do it hard, and that's going to be a big key. But this is the type of offense, you make one mistake, it's a 50-yard gain on a cutback on a trap play. You make one mistake, they're getting outside for 30. You make one mistake, a 3rd and 10 gets converted on a handoff or a pitch. This is a game where you have to be disciplined against Navy, not passive, disciplined. They're very, very different things.
Navy thrives on undisciplined defenses, man. I mean, that's where they feast. We've talked all week about how explosive of an offense it is. And it's not because they just say, all right, our guys are better than yours, and we're just going to go out and throw it over the top of you. And we have a couple of backs that you just physically can't tackle no matter what you want to do. They thrive on putting defenders in a bind where it's one of those where, it's a one-on-one matchup. They kind of have somebody that they have to choose one or the other, the defender, and they have a quarterback that makes smart decisions. So being assignment correct and disciplined, and I think you said something that's very crucial, do it at 100%, right? If you are going to make a mistake, make sure that it's not because you're just lost in space and you're kind of just out there looking around waiting to see what happens. So I agree. Has to be disciplined. That can't come at a sacrifice to speed and aggressiveness. Absolutely.
I believe, Trevor, with the size advantage, the power advantage, the speed advantage Notre Dame has, if they're disciplined, I do think they can shut Navy down to some degree, where Navy will get a couple big plays, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but they're not going to be able to consistently gash you snap after snap after snap. That's going to be a key, right? Is if you play fast and you play disciplined football, I think you can shut this offense down to some degree. I don't think it's going to be like 6 points like it was was it 2021? They won 34-6. This is a much better Navy offense than that. More talented, better coach, better scheme, not as one-dimensional as it was back then. But I think you can slow it down, in my opinion, in a big way if you're able to be disciplined. But the discipline has to be countered with number 2, Trevor, and that is you've got to be aggressive and you've got to dominate the trenches. And the way you dominate the trenches is to have an aggressive game plan. Aggressive doesn't mean blitzing every down. You don't want to blitz the option, right? I don't think you don't want to, because if they catch you in the wrong blitz, it's going to go for a big play. They're going to run the duck play underneath, and it's going to go for a big play. They're going to have a trap play called, and you're blitzing this way, and it's going to go for a big play. It's more about coming off and bullying the Navy offensive line. Don't let them get to the second level. Force them, work them back with your power and aggressiveness. And the big thing is dominating in the trenches and being aggressive, to me, does to the triple the 2 things that are just kryptonite to the triple. Number 1, creates negatives. You don't want to get behind the sticks when you're running an option offense, right? Even one that can throw the ball like they can. And number 2, and this is a big one, is it speeds all the decision making up. I learned this the one thing I ran a triple option for a year in college, hated it, but ran it. And I coached in it for 2 years as well. And this was always kryptonite to us. And every time Notre Dame does this to Navy or Air Force or Army, it's the same thing. And it's what Stanford used to do to Chip Kelly. Whenever Stanford under Jim Harbaugh would have success against Oregon, it was because they did this. When you speed up the decision-making of the quarterback, you're able to fly to the football a lot more effectively. So instead of him pitching that ball out over the slot, you're making him pitch that ball at the end of the line of scrimmage. You're making him have to get that pull out real fast so everybody knows he can't ride that dive because that fullback's getting blown up, and you got to get that sucker out of there quick. You know what I mean? When you force them to declare where the ball's going as quickly as possible, you then allow your defense to fly to the football. When they're able to go on those long rides, do that power read wide, carry the speed option out a lot further, get downhill, pitching off of the edge, that's when their offense gets rolling. And the quarterback can let plays develop, let the receiver – hey, you can't throw the long wheel route if your quarterback's getting his back put on the ground. You know what I mean? So being aggressive, attacking this defense, not with pressures and blitzes and stunts and all that, but just come off hard, come off fast, and force them to declare early. That is kryptonite to an option offense. And not a triple option, an option offense. That includes what Chip Kelly did at Oregon. That includes what Air Force does. That includes what Army does. That includes what Navy does. That includes what Stanford does, right? That was a big part of the success they had against Stanford was they forced Ashton Daniels to make fast decisions, and it resulted in him making some wrong decisions, which led to some turnovers. That's a big part of this, in my opinion, Trevor, is be aggressive, force them to declare as quickly as possible.
Riley Mills and Howard Cross need to go out and play like the preseason 2 top 10 interior defensive linemen that they were graded out at. And we've started to see that over the last couple of weeks. They started to come on a little bit against Louisville, and I think they really turned it on for Stanford and Georgia Tech, and they're going to be needed just as much this week as others. It's awesome that Gabriel Rubio is coming back, and they still have Donovan Heinisch, but you don't want to be in a position where like your 2 veteran guys, your 2 starters are kind of having an off game, and Gabriel Rubio is thrust into a role where he's ending up having to play 35, 40 snaps when maybe he was really only intended to play that, 25-ish range. So you want to make sure that the interior of the defensive line is as disruptive as they have been over the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be paramount for what Navy likes to do on offense, man. Couldn't agree more.
They've been playing so well lately.
Mm-hmm.
If they can keep that rolling, Navy's going to have a tough time.
Man.
Yeah. They're going to have a tough time, Trevor. I mean, it's just look, there's some things that are kind of universal in football. And I don't care what offense you run, whether you're running a triple option, a veer option, whether you're running the midline option, whether you're running a read zone, whether you're a drop back, throw it all over the field team, whether you're an air raid team, whether you're a spread, doesn't matter. You get dominated up the middle, you're going to have a hard time winning.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say hard time. You're going to have a hard time moving the ball with any kind of consistency.
Yeah.
It really is as simple as that. And those guys can have a big game. And it starts with Riley and Howard and obviously Donovan Heinisch and obviously Gabriel Rubio, but it's also about, Drake Bowen.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about Kingston. You know what I mean? And Jack Kaiser and Jaden Alsbury, those guys up the middle. I am fascinated to see what Notre Dame is going to do defensively. Fascinated. I am very curious to see how they're going to use all those linebackers. Like, would it shock you if we looked out like, is Drake Bowen, Kingston, Jack Kaiser, and Jaden Alsbury all on the field right now? You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't shock me if we saw something like that, Trevor. I mean, but how do you use them? I mean, is this a game where maybe there's some snaps where you have Jordan Clark at corner and you have Jaden Alsbury in the slot?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying full time, but I'm talking about as a wrinkle in certain situations when they're in certain personnel packages. You know what I mean? That's what you go to. It's going to be very fast because that's one thing Al Golden does a pretty good job of is matching personnel packages. And when they run guys in the field, they know exactly who's running on the field for Notre Dame. I'm very curious to see how they're going to match that one. So it's, it's going to be some. Tommy Guns just said 1-6-4 defense. That would make sense if Riley Mills and Howard Cross and Josh Burnham weren't such great matchups against this defense. And I'm going to tell you something else. I'm very curious to see how RJ Oben does in this game
Me too.
Because he's been a little disappointing for me this season, but the way he has crashed off the edge in recent games, like you may say, hey, RJ, sick the fullback, man. You know what I mean? He's blown up some read zones the last couple weeks, and forced that quarterback to kind of get outside quickly. But it could also be a game where he hasn't faced something like this, and how's he going to handle it? But I'm curious to see how they use him. You know what I mean? Like, do they have him? Nick in the chat says KV off the edge. I mean, that I don't like. I have a friend of mine who thinks they should go full Micah Parsons with Kingston and just put him on the edge. And I'm like, bro, I understand why you say that, but like, this kid is an elite inside linebacker.
Yeah.
Keep doing with him what you're doing, which is inside linebacker on base downs and put him off the edge on third down. I'm fine with that. This would be a game where I would understand them saying, in this particular game, we're going to put him on the edge. So it's going to be fat. And that's what's so great about this linebacking core, Trevor, because there's such unique skill sets. I mean, this could be a game where, would it shock you if you saw Jack Kaiser basically playing as in a 4-4 defense with Jack and Jaden Osbury playing outside?
No.
And Kingston and Drake playing inside? I mean, or if you saw Jack and Drake inside with Jaden Osbury in the slot and Kingston coming off the edge as the Viper, none of those things would shock me. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm very fascinated to see what they do in this game with that personnel. Because you'd think they're probably not just going to line up in their base defense. They're going to give some different wrinkles. And I'm curious to see what those are. Very curious to see what those are. Number 3, Trev, this is an easy one, dude. I'm going to kick it to you right now. You've watched a lot of this Navy team. It's tackle well. Don't give them extra yards. Wherever they get the ball, they go down. That is fullbacks can't get extra yards after the tackle. You can't let the slots catch and run. You can't let receivers catch and run. You've got to tackle. This has got to be a great, fundamentally sound tackling game for Notre Dame. No extra yards. Make them earn everything. No cheap yards.
Notre Dame's linebackers did a really good job against Georgia Tech of not allowing those extra 1 to 2 yards on that additional push. They played with really great leg drive and finish tackles, which is one thing that they're going to have to do again against Navy. Now, I will say Navy doesn't have a lot of guys that are just able to make people miss blatantly in the open field, not like a Jeremiah Love, not like a Jadarian Price, but what their offense does a really good job of is getting players out of position. So they're able to make extra play and get extra yardage on plays by breaking tackles of guys who are caught reaching, right? And guys not bringing their feet with them when they tackle. You saw that a lot against Memphis, right? You got to see them generate a lot of those missed tackles because they're going up and matching up against guys who are out of position. Notre Dame throughout the season has honestly been a fairly solid open field tackling team. And none is going to be more true than what they're going to have to do on Saturday, because this is a Navy team that can hurt you in many different ways. They're very fast in how they attack the perimeter. They do a lot of misdirection things. So again, all of that discipline, dominating in the trenches, yes, that all has to work. You got to be able to tackle well. Have to be able to tackle well in space, man.
Dude, you cannot be in a situation where you read it perfectly and you're right there in space and you've got the slot back keyed up for a 2-yard loss and then you miss them. I mean, we saw that last week, right? I mean,
we did.
You said they tackled really well later in the game, and Jaden Osbury's stop on that second down reverse completely changed the game. Vince and I broke that down upon further review. It's 21-7, late third quarter. They get the ball to one of their dynamic athletes on a stuff that's been hurting people all year, and it's him and Jaden Osbury in space. He makes Jaden miss. It's 21-14. Late in the third quarter. Jaden does a phenomenal job, comes to balance, doesn't overplay it, has a nice inside-out position, and forces the guy to basically try to make a move. But Jaden's like, I'm going wherever you're going, stones him, and then kind of power drives him a little bit, which I thought was awesome. You know what I mean? And it was a statement play. And then, of course, next play, they don't get it, kick a field goal, gets blocked, and it gets ball game. Right? That was such a huge play. It's nothing more devastating than you've got the right call, you're in the right position, and you miss on the tackle. And then that happened early, because you had Christian Gray and it was Christian Gray and Jordan Clark, or Christian Gray and Xavier Watts missed a tackle. Xavier had a missed tackle early in the game. You can't allow those things to kind of happen. This is not a team you want to give up extra yards to. If it's 2nd and 8 and you got a chance for a -2 or a 0, you've got to get the -2 or 0. You can't let them fall forward for 4 yards and next thing you know it's 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 4 or whatever the case may be. If it's 3rd and 5 and you hit that quarterback at the line of scrimmage, you can't let him fall forward for 3 yards because at 4th and 5, they're probably punting. At 4th and 2, they're probably going for it. You know what I mean? Like those things are huge. You've got to tackle well, and you've got to be physical at the point of attack. And that's something that Marcus Freeman talked about after the game, and I think that was correct. This is one of the most physical tackling games we've seen from Notre Dame. When they were hitting Georgia Tech guys after the first quarter, they were hitting them and they were going down right where they got hit. And that was a good to see. And then the last one, Trevor, and this is one we hinted at the last couple of days is going to be important in this game. Navy's probably going to rip off a couple big plays, whether it's a fullback trap or a pass play or something. They're going to get it, but it's got to be very limited. Key number 4 isn't no big plays. It's just limit the big plays. They get a few of them. It is what it is, but you've got to limit it. You've got to really limit the kind of big plays. And when they do get big plays, you've got to make sure they're not scoring plays. Make them earn everything they get. So that's going to be my final key when it comes to Notre Dame defense, Trevor, which, again, we're going to be a little shorter on keys to victory on this because we spent so much time kind of breaking down defending the triple option or breaking down the Navy option yesterday and the day before. But these are very important keys. Limit the big plays. I don't think this team is good enough against this defense to just go on some of the methodical 10, 12 play drives. They might go early as Notre Dame feels their way. That's kind of what we've seen Notre Dame do recently is they give up a couple of those early. But once Notre Dame gets you figured out, you're not – teams haven't so far been able to go on those long drives. As long as you're disciplined, as long as you're aggressive, as long as you tackle well, they're not going to do that in this game either. So what you've got to make sure you do is don't give up a lot of big plays. Have to be very, very limited on the number of big plays you give up in this game.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot this week, man, around when you just play a good offense and you play an explosive offense, as awesome as it would be to watch. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, right? But it's really hard to say that Notre Dame's defense is just going to shut them down in any aspect that they want to do. Again, I would love to see that, but Navy is a really good offense. So if you can just keep it limited, to your point. And my last key that I'll throw in a little nugget here, kind of similar to what I talked about on the offensive side, you got to win on early downs against Navy. Win on early downs because they're not a great football team at converting third downs. I think they're at 41.5% on the season, which puts them around 55th, I think. So winning early, win early on first down, generate disruptive plays in the backfield on first and second down, and put them into an obvious situation where they can't. If Navy gets into 3rd and 2, their entire playbook is open. Their entire playbook is open.
3rd and 5,
yeah,
honestly, kind of has them at almost their entire playbook.
Yeah.
I mean, they got to be in some 3rd and long situations, no question.
Mm-hmm.
But if you give up the big plays, Trevor, you never get to that, to your
100%,
point, right?
100%.
And part of the reason Navy's offense, and this is a great point you're talking about, part of the reason Navy's offense has been so good, despite being not good on 3rd down, is because they haven't needed to get to 3rd down because they're such a big play offense. That's a great point, is get them by limiting big plays. This is what you're saying. By limiting big plays and be having early down success, which gets to the 3 keys we talked about, puts them in 3rd down situations that they just haven't been great at this year. Now, part of the thing about Navy's 3rd down offense too is Navy doesn't always look to get a first down on 3rd down. People have to understand that a little bit too, because sometimes if they're in 3rd and 8 and it's in a position where they're going to be in a potential 4th down situation, they'll go for it. And on the season, they're 6 of 7 on 4th down. So but again, that gets back to being aggressive. If it's 3rd and 5 and they run a play and you can get a -2, now all of a sudden they're not going for it on 4th down. But the more times you get them into those 3rd down situations, Trevor, the better it's going to be for your defense. But if you're giving up a lot of big plays and just chunk play after chunk play, whether it's because of scheme, blown assignment, missed tackles, whatever the case may be, then you're going to have a lot harder time stopping this Navy offense. A lot harder time. And that's what Memphis was. I mean, early shut down, stone in the run, and then boom, seam route, boom, wheel route, boom, quarterback takes off up the sideline on a play where I think he broke a tackle like it couple yards down the field, if I remember correctly, that first long touchdown run that Blake Horvath had. And that's exactly what killed Memphis, is just big plays. They just ripped them with big plays in that game. Just big play after big play. They'd like stone them, big play. Stone them, big play. Stone them, big play. And Notre Dame can't allow that to happen. Just can't allow that to happen. That's going to be a big key. So, Trevor, that's going to do it for the defensive keys to victory, folks. Before we get into our predictions, I want you to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, and as always, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Mr. Trowbridge, it's prediction time.
Sure is.
And let's just set the stage for these predictions, because you and I were talking before the show. I've had a lot of friends of mine, people that I know, my dad, people that we do work with, things like that, friends of mine, they're Notre Dame. Everybody's really confident about this game. And I love the confidence, because this is Notre Dame's a good football team. You should expect them to win. But as you said to me, I think part of that is because they see Navy and they just remember how bad they've beaten Navy. It's been a while since Navy's really given Notre Dame a game. I mean, I know 2 years ago ended up being a close game, but like that was more about Notre Dame playing bad and blowing like a 35-13 halftime lead. That should have been a dominant game. And I think most people don't look at that as like, gee, Navy was really good. It was more like you played like crap in the second half. 2019, blowout. 2018, blowout. 2017 was the last time you really played a good 4-quarter game against Navy. That's when they wore those like Newt Rockne uniforms and all that kind of. It's been that long. They didn't play in 2020. So it's really been a long time since Notre Dame and Navy played a 4-quarter just, wow, this is a really good game. And so I get it. But I think that can happen in this game, Trevor, because this is a good Navy team. But big picture, this is an opportunity for Notre Dame to make a statement, because I've heard a lot of people in the national media, Notre Dame better watch out against Navy and Army. And then I know what the storyline is going to be. If Notre Dame dominates, it's going to be, well, Navy's not that good. But here's the deal. That's the media people. I think I'm curious to see how the committee will view it. But if Navy keeps winning after this, 7-1 next week, 8-1 the next week, 9-1 the next week, Navy's going to have a shot to creep into the top 10, and you've got a chance to earn another away from home double-digit victory, hopefully, against a team that I think has a shot to be ranked. And the committee will look at the fact that they were ranked when they played. Same thing with Texas A&M. Like, yeah, they were a top 25 team when you went on the road and beat them at their place by 10 points. And so this is a great opportunity for Notre Dame to make a statement. And they're going to have more. We thought they'd have 2 November statement opportunities, like late October, November statement opportunities. We just thought it was going to be Florida State and USC. But now it's Navy and Army. And this is the first one. You've got to make a statement in this game, Trevor. So with that, I'll let you respond to that before we dive into the predictions.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, man. There's a lot of people out there that believe that, it's Navy, it's a service school. It's like, well, hey, listen, what have we told you guys all week? This is an explosive service school. This is a Navy team that's 4th in the country in points per game. This is they're 2nd in the country in yards per attempt and yards per completion and quarterback rating in a game. Those numbers might be a little different after what some of the games were played yesterday. But regardless, we're talking about a top 5 team in most efficiency categories on offense. And we have talked about it being a best on best matchup, because obviously the strength and heart and soul of Notre Dame's team is their defense. But they haven't seen a test like this year. They haven't. Don't get looped into it's Navy. Look what we've done against Navy. Look what Notre Dame's overall record is against Navy, right? Like I understand some of that narrative, but there's a lot of things working against Notre Dame, right? It's fall break for them this week. They have a bye week next week. They have a night game against Florida State the week they get after. This is a game that Notre Dame could potentially look over. So this is a really good opportunity for Notre Dame to come out and make a statement against a good undefeated football team. Really good.
So with that being said, Mr. Trowbridge, give me your score prediction and how you see the game playing out.
My final score prediction for this one, I have Notre Dame winning 34-17. So first half, I could see it being a little bit of a shootout. This is a high-powered Navy offense, and as much faith as some of the young guys have instilled in me through the last couple weeks, this is just the first time they've seen Navy. It's the first time Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury and Kingston Viliamasa and Leonard Moore. I don't know how much Jordan Clark faced the triple option when he was at Arizona State. So there's a lot of different I mean, Bryce Young, this is going to be his first time facing it. Logan Thomas, if he sees reps. So I think early on, I think Navy is going to have some success moving the football because it's a different look that they haven't seen before. I think Notre Dame's offense, I think they're going to take advantage of every possession that they have. I see this being a 17-14 type of game at halftime. And Notre Dame kind of splits halves offensively. They score 17 in the first half, 17 in the second half. I think the defense is what really turns it on coming out of halftime because they're now comfortable. This defense, what we've seen is once they kind of get a glimpse of what's happening, and the second they get a smidge of feeling comfortable, they kind of let that athleticism take over and they start to let their instincts take over. So that's how I see the game playing out. Notre Dame gets another ranked win on the season, 34-17.
If the game plays out how you think it does, Trevor, give me your game balls. Who gets your game ball for offense first?
On offense, I have Jeremiah Love. I think this is going to be a game where it's just kind of set up for him to go off. The last couple weeks, run game has kind of held him in check because a lot of teams have to game plan for, hey, number 4 is one of the most explosive players in college football. We can't let him hurt us. I'm not saying that Navy is not going to come in with that mindset, but it's just such a lopsided athletic battle, in my opinion. I think this is going to be a game that no matter what Jeremiah Love does, anytime he touches the football, he's going to be unstoppable. He gets it in the short passing game. They line him up in the slot, run a slot fade concept with him, just lining him up 5 deep in the backfield on an inside zone. I think he has his way. I really do. And on defense,
let me first on that. I'll say this: if the Notre Dame coaches will finally start to they've done a nice job of mixing up how he gets the ball, run, pass.
Yeah.
The problem is in the run game, it's been very much just zone, inside counter, zone. If they will start to mix up the tendencies that they've had for him, and we saw what they did against Georgia Tech. The first time they gave him the ball outside, he was gone. That's going to be a key for me. Is they're going to have to. Not that you don't run inside zone with Jeremiah Love. I mean, do it because we saw him bounce one for 39 yards against Stanford for a touchdown. I mean, he ran a counter right up in the A gap for a 21-yard touchdown against A&M. But give me a little bit different because that's where I think Jeremiah will really punish Navy is if they come out early and they hit him with like a little quick pitch or something like that, a little quick crack. Or get him on an outside zone where they think they have leverage or something like where they, one of those type of plays, he could go, man. Like he to your point. And then all of a sudden he's getting the ball downhill and you're not crashing quite as hard as you were before, where as soon as he's getting the ball, I mean, teams are just flying downhill against him. But if all of a sudden he pops a couple outside, now it's like you can't quite crash as hard. I think that's where Jeremiah is going to go off. It's not like his lack of success in recent games, in my opinion, isn't because of him. It's the room hasn't been there for him to work.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he gets downhill, teams are just crashing the line of scrimmage. They've got to do a better job of mixing up, getting him yes, inside first, outside next. I think that's going to be a key for them because right now it's like they're using him inside and then it's like Jadarian's your outside runner. He's the one getting kind of the pin and pull type of stuff and getting some of those outside runs. And, I'd like to see them do a little bit more to get Jeremiah in space in the run game as well as not just because like pass game wise, he's just been money in the last 2. He had the 25-yard catch and run against Stanford. I mean, he's had two 25-yard catches and a 12-yard catch in the last 2 games. And the furthest ball he caught downfield was like about 4 yards.
Yeah. That's
it. You know what I mean? So it's like, but like, let's see some of that a little bit in the run game. And I think that then makes the inside zones and the counters and the duo. We actually ran a duo this past week. It's actually with Jadarian, but that's where I think that stuff is more effective. Now, so I agree with you about him being the potential game ball guy, but that's going to be the key. So give me your defensive one.
Yeah. Defense for me, it just always seems like there's a defender that Notre Dame has every time they play Navy, just end the game with an obscene amount of tackles. Mine for me is actually not even listed in the starting lineup. Mine's going to be Jaden Osbury. He has been one of the best run defenders and one of the best open field tacklers that Notre Dame has had this season. He kind of came in and started changing the pace a little bit against Northern Illinois. And that to me kind of highlighted, okay, you have a good sideline to sideline run stopper at linebacker that plays a lot more athletic than your typical box linebacker that's built to stop the run. And he's fast, man. I did not realize how fast Jaden Osbury was. I really didn't. There's times when, and it could also be the single digit.
Now you know why he was my number one ranked player in his class.
And I can't say I don't blame you, man.
Side.
I do not blame. There's times out there where I think he's a safety. I really do with how well he moves. So I have Jaden Osbury getting an obscene amount of tackles on Saturday, and I think Navy's going to try to push the ball to the perimeter. I don't think that their game plan is going to be trying to run right at Riley Mills and Howard Cross. And I have Jaden Osbury playing a really good sideline to sideline game and shutting down runs on the perimeter.
Trevor, I have two scenarios, two predictions in two scenarios, right?
Okay.
And it's real simple. If the Notre Dame defense adjusts early and plays the way it has the last month of the season, where they are holding opponents to about 10 points per game overall and less than 10 against the first team defense, they'll dominate and win 42-14. Like, I really believe that. Because I think the more they force punts and turnovers on downs, and the more time the offense gets on the field, the more the offense gets into rhythm. If the defense struggles, I think this is a dogfight, and it's 27-20. That's my two. It really comes down to the defense and how quickly they can adjust, to me. I'm leaning more towards, right now, the blowout version just because of what this defense has been. But the fact that they're so young on defense is what gives me pause and has me thinking I may end up going with the 27-21 in our prediction for tomorrow. Right now, I'm feeling good. I'm in a great mood. 42-14. Defense is going to dominate. They're going to dominate the middle. The speed is going to take over everything, like you said. But I keep thinking I don't love young guys against the triple. And you mentioned a lot of young guys on this defense. And they're going to have to be on point and against this defense. And so if it's a game where their youth is evident, it's 27-20 Notre Dame. If the youth is overcompensated by the speed and talent, then I think this game gets out of hand. That's where I'm at. Game ball wise, I'm with you, actually. I was going to say one of the two running backs. Right now, I'm leaning towards Jeremiah. I feel like he's been bottled up a little bit the last few weeks. I just don't think that's going to happen this week. I think this is a game where he kind of goes off, has 130-plus total yards of offense, rushing and throwing or receiving, and just has a monster game. Riley's going to do his thing. Jadarian's going to do his thing. But I think Jeremiah is the one this week that just rips off a couple big plays, one run, one pass, and they're just like, dude, we have no one on our on our team that can even remotely play with that kid. And that's how I see this one going. Defensively, I like your picks. I think it's Xavier Watts is my prediction for, because I feel like a safety. This is a game where he's going to have to make some big plays in the pass game, maybe have a pick, maybe have a big stop, force a big fumble. I think he's the guy that's going to have to really wreck this game for the Notre Dame defense. And the D tackles are going to play great, and the linebackers need to play great. But I think Xavier could be the difference between this thing getting out of hand or not, with just being able to force, reading. Horvath doesn't go through a whole lot of reads now. I mean, he'll make like one-man reads, and he may think, hey, I got this one read, and I got this wheel out thrown, and all of a sudden Xavier Watts comes over and picks one off. I think things like that could be a big part of it. So that's my pick, Trevor. I'm going 27-20 or 42-14. I'll have to pick one for tomorrow, right? I have to have something figured out by tonight. Right now I'm leaning towards the 42-14, but that youth part just really gets to me, man. And I've got to see how I'm going to feel about that. So we'll see what my final one is, but that's where I'm at right now. So Trevor, thanks for being with me today, man. Enjoyed it as always. You and I will be back tomorrow. Somebody asked earlier who's going to be doing the mailbag tomorrow. It's this guy and this guy, me and Trevor tomorrow. Trevor and I tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
So going to be looking forward to it. We'll get started at 1:00 tomorrow. Saturday after the game, Ryan's not going to be with us because he's all being shady about, I'm going to be at the game. I'm going to the, you know what I mean? So he's actually going to be at the game. So it'll just be me, Trevor, and Sean. I don't know about Vince right now. His son might be having a college visit this weekend, but it'll definitely be me. It'll definitely be Trevor tomorrow, and definitely on us on Saturday. So we'll be with you guys here very, very soon. So anyway, thanks for joining me, Trevor. Everybody, we'll be back here in about 20 seconds with me and Bill Bender. But before we go, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, I'm telling you, you are missing out on our premium message board at boards.com. irishbreakdown.com. And be real quick, Trevor, we did have a couple quick super chats. Leonardo DiCaprio with a Navy plus 21.5 line hammer it. Okay. Thanks for the super chat, Leonardo. Appreciate that very, very much. Interesting name there. Appreciate the super chat. And then Matt 2011 GT, just a small thanks for the IB team for all the IB team provides us each week. It is our pleasure. Truly, it is our pleasure. And I thank you very, very much for the super chat, Matt. Very, very much. You have an awesome, great day. Trev, thanks for being with me, man. Talk to you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Now, folks, I am joined by my guy, Bill Bender, college football writer at The Sporting News, co-host of the CFB Nation or the CFB All-America show at CFB Nation. I know you guys did a recording today that we'll get up tomorrow, previewing this weekend's games, Bill. But very interesting weekend last week. Got some right, got some wrong. I think you actually got a couple more right than I did because I got a couple wrong. But Bill, another big weekend of college football games. 5 games this weekend between ranked opponents, man. It's going to be another separation Saturday, so to speak, here in a lot of these conferences with some of the matchups this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, going back to last week real quick, we both touched on Kirby and the underdog card last week, and boy, did he play that. He dealt it from the bottom of the deck, the top of the deck. They were just ready. And we've watched that over the years. I knew, when you start, it's kind of what you guys were just talking about with Notre Dame Navy, and we don't have to get into that game. I know you talked about it all week, but
feel free to talk about it, Bill. I mean, it's a top 25 game, so if you want to start talking about it,
I'm saying you know 2 series in what's going to happen, and I kind of felt that way. Georgia, I picked Texas, but 2 series in, you see how Georgia's flying to the football, you see how angry they look, you see the passion they're playing with, and you're like, Texas is in trouble. So it's kind of like you were talking about with Notre Dame handling this triple option where I if Navy chews up a quarter to start the game and Horvath scores a touchdown, you'd be like, yeah, this is going to be a dogfight. If Notre Dame 3-and-outs them and scores, and you can see that those young guys can handle the triple option, that was a scary one. I lean toward blowout there, but I just never know with Navy. I don't think Navy has played anybody yet. And that's one thing I'm considering with that game.
Did you say they haven't played anybody?
Not in the top 100, right?
Memphis. Army's the one that hasn't played anybody. Army's played all bad.
Navy got Memphis, and that's
Navy's
really
played all bad except one.
Yeah, okay.
And they controlled that game. I mean, they won that game handily. In the second half, Bill. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. There's no question about it. So let's get to some of these other games, Bill. Again, just a really interesting week of football. And we'll start off with some of these. We got 2 primetime games that, not say primetime games that I think are just huge this weekend. And that's LSU and Texas A&M. We'll talk about that. That is, to me, the premier matchup of the weekend, in my opinion. That is one of 2 games that I think, Bill, maybe you could argue Missouri and Bama, maybe, but I don't think Missouri's a playoff team. They're in trouble. I think this is the one game, A&M and LSU and Notre Dame and Navy are the 2 games that have the biggest playoff implications for both teams moving forward. You could argue maybe a couple of Illinois, LSU, Oregon. I'm not talking technically. I'm talking about teams that we actually think have a shot. Navy has a legitimate shot, especially if they beat Notre Dame, of getting into, in possibly even if they lose to Notre Dame, of getting into that group of 5 bid with the AAC championship, because then their only loss would be to a non-conference opponent. And then, of course, Notre Dame has a shot to get in. The other one is LSU and Texas A&M. We're also going to talk about Penn State, Wisconsin. Now, this is a very interesting game for me, Bill. I think those are, to me, the 2 biggest games of the weekend. But there's several others I want to talk about first, Bill, before we get to those. And one of the games that I want to talk about is this number 5 Texas at number 25 Vanderbilt. Who had on their preseason prediction show or article how important this late October game of Texas at Vanderbilt was going to be when it came down to the SEC championship? Bill, I don't see it happening. But right now, Vanderbilt's kind of in control of their own destiny in regard to playing for the SEC championship. They got 1 conference loss. And you beat Texas, you're literally ahead of Texas in the conference standings. Very interesting game in that regard. But also, where is Texas here and here after what happened to them where they just got physically beat up last week by Georgia? Where are they there?
Well, yeah. I mean, first off, Vandy, how much money you make if you say, they're going to beat Alabama and Texas this year, if they were somehow able to pull this off.
You're retiring is basically what you're doing if you had money on both of those games.
Right. Of the games that we're going to talk about today, this was the hardest one for me to pick because I don't know what Texas headspace is right now. If it's, you see teams come off a game like that where they did battle back and they made it a 1-score game with the help of the refs. But does it take a quarter to get going? I don't think Vanderbilt's going to be able to guard them on the perimeter. I also know that Vanderbilt doesn't turn the ball over with Clark Lee and they run clock and they're good on third down. So they have like a lot of the ingredients to the upset cookbook, which an undisciplined Alabama team walked into. I think Texas got a little more discipline than that. So that number on the spread is about right. And I think Texas gets it done. A lot of manufactured Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning quarterback controversy starts. My take on it, it's not a popular take, but it's my take, is that Quinn Ewers will be the starter for the remainder of the season unless he gets hurt.
Why is it not popular?
Because everybody wants Arch to play.
Gotcha.
Right.
So you're going with common sense, not what's going to sell, get clicks and do all that.
That, and I've tried to have this conversation logically. Oh, well, and Brian, you know this as being a coach, like what Sark did Saturday made sense. Sometimes you just quarterback, big game, going too fast, not going well, give him a second
game back after missing a month.
Right. Take a breath. We'll try Arch. And by the way, anybody that watched that, Arch didn't do much. Georgia was ready for Arch too. So I think the next time we could possibly see something like this pop up is when Texas plays Texas A&M. But for those that think, unless Quinn Ewers gets hurt, he's going to take this at least to the playoff.
Yeah. He did not play well last week, but people act like, Quinn doesn't have a phenomenal beatdown, performance against Bama under his belt last year. Like he didn't put the team on his shoulders in the second half against Washington and lead them back and almost tie that. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like we've gotten to this point where it's like if Arch's last name was Jones and his dad was a UPS truck driver and family's just a normal middle-class Midwestern family, we're not having these same conversations right now. Nobody's talking about Quinn Ewers getting benched. There was that BS report that came out this week that Quinn Ewers is going to sit out the year and all this other bull crap. It is sad what's kind of happened to analysis and journalism, but that's a different conversation for a different day. I'm with you. The reality is that if you go back and watch that game, if the Texas offensive line plays better, Texas wins that game comfortably because Georgia still can't cover, Bill. I mean, you watch that game, they still can't cover receivers. They really can't.
Their secondary is not that great.
No, it's not. But they never really had time to get the ball down the field in those situations. They really didn't. Vanderbilt is a gritty team. They don't have the ability in the front to dominate Texas the way Georgia did. This game is not so much about can Vandy pull off another upset. This game is more about where's Texas's head at. Do they come back and they're in their feelings and they're a little bummed out about losing to Vanderbilt, kind of like Bama was the week after when they went and played South Carolina when they got beat by Vandy? They were not in a good headspace and they sleptwalked through that game and almost got upset. That could happen to Texas in this game, Bill. There's no question. But if they're in their good headspace, I think they dominate this football game. I know it's on the road. I get all that, but I think Texas is still the better team. By far, it's just about where are they in the headspace. I did want to ask you, Bill, if it's okay. We didn't have this on the schedule, but there's another that Bama Missouri game.
Mm-hmm.
Is this who Bama is this year, or is there like we're going to figure it out and get? I mean, because we don't know that. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is a heck of a coach. His career track record shows that. Bama's a different animal. Is there a moment that Bama figures it out, or is this just who they're going to be this year?
I think it's who they are, and they'll beat Missouri because Missouri they're not going to have Knoll. They're probably not going to have Brady Cook. Sounds like
they're not that doubtful. Good anyway.
They're not that good.
I saw Mookie Cooper's also doubtful. in that game.
They're going to be hurting, and I think Alabama wins. But is it a guaranteed blowout? No, because they are penalized a lot. They, one of the things that probably should get written about, and players will never admit it. These guys play for Nick Saban, so there's some of them that it's easy to check out. Remember, 18 to 22-year-olds, they'll never admit it. Be like, yeah, I checked out of that season. But different coach, you're, junior or senior. They've been ripped a lot for, I think who was it this week? It was AJ McCarron this week that said, they were too worried about TikTok. Mm-hmm. And I've heard this speech with Ohio State before. So, yeah, I mean, it could be a little bit culture, but it doesn't mean that Kellen DeBoer is not a good coach. But in the confines of what this season is, they are who they are. I just think that's what they are, and they may go 10-2, but it's not that good of a team right now.
That's kind of where I'm at too, Bill, because they have some talent at spots, but I think the Bama game was a little bit of fool's gold. Let me rephrase. The Bama first half was a little bit of fool's gold. And it more was about exposing Georgia, looking back, hindsight, didn't feel that way at the time. Looking back, because I thought Bama was going to be pretty good this year, and I didn't put enough stock into how much they lost from a per player standpoint. This is a different team if they have Caleb Downs at safety with Malachi Moore instead of, what's there now and some of these other guys. And the other thing too is their offensive line is yet to impress me really all season. And you don't have that to hang your hat on. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have that, hey, we're struggling, we're just going to line up and we're just going to beat you up front and we're going to run the football and just grind this one out. They don't have that ability. Like, they're the polar opposite of Georgia. If you put Georgia and Bama together and you say, okay, I'm going to take Georgia's big guys, O-line, D-line, and I'm going to take Bama's skill on both sides of the ball, it's one heck of a team. You know what I mean? But they're polar opposite strengths and weaknesses right now. Bama could beat anybody in a 7-on-7 tournament right now, but they struggle, in my opinion, or they could play with anybody. But the trenches, they're just not good in the offensive line. They're very slow. They're very unathletic. I just don't think Missouri has the ability to do anything about it. So That's my thoughts. The other question I have, a little Big Ten game, Bill. Number 20, Illinois at number 1, Oregon. Oregon had a little bit of a letdown game last week. Let's be honest about that. That was what that 35-0 game against Purdue was. A little bit of a letdown game Friday night across the country. Going back home, does Illinois have any shot of making this a game, Bill, in your opinion? I think it's a 21.5 point spread.
I think they can hang around. It'd be boring. Luke Altmaier can run a little bit, and they can try to control the clock. How sustainable, how long, I don't know. I mean, they did hang around with Penn State. They are doing the cross-country thing. Brett Bielema has done a nice job. I don't know how good they are. Their defense plays well and plays fundamental, but can they beat Oregon? No. Can they cover that number? Yes, I think they will. And they've become, to me, let's say Illinois goes out there and loses 28 or 34-27, something like that. And then they went out. They're a 10-win team with losses to Penn State and Oregon that aren't
competitive losses. Competitive
losses on the road, Penn State at night, and then they get whiteout or whatever. And then this one, that's a resume that's going to get talked about at the very end of the year. Yeah. So
the question is going to be, again, they've got to beat somebody. That's the interesting thing is the Big Ten has given a lot of teams schedules that are allowing that. Like, they went the opposite of what the SEC did.
Yep.
So now, okay, yes, the 2 losses are good, but the committee has always said they value wins more than losses. So 2 things about that. So now you better hope that Nebraska runs the table and is really good, because otherwise you're hanging your hat on your best win being maybe Nebraska, maybe Michigan. You know what I mean? And that could be where you say, okay, we're going to take a 9-3 Georgia team with wins over Clemson and Texas, but 3 losses over a 10-2 Illinois team that doesn't have any good wins. That's the rub that they're going to have. But it's going to be a conversation if you get into some of those situations, Bill. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and
they're almost better off upsetting Oregon and then getting upset by Rutgers in a couple weeks.
Right.
Honestly.
I put that scenario out there on my feed this week about There is a scenario if Illinois pulls off this win that Illinois, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana could all be 11-1 with 8-1 conference records. This is the piece this is the most unlikely piece of that scenario. The rest of it is like, if Illinois does this, the rest is entirely feasible because Ohio State winning at Penn State. Yeah, that could happen. Ohio State beating Indiana. Yeah, that could probably happen. Can Indiana hold up their end without Curtis Rourke this weekend against Washington? Yeah, I don't know. But, that scenario, I mean, it's like, let alone how are we going to figure out the playoff? I don't know. But how are we going to figure out who's going to Indy at that point? So
exactly.
It could get really messy. And they're not the only conference where I think that could happen.
Another conference where that can happen, Bill, and this is one of the games we said we were going to talk about, is in the Big 12, where we predicted chaos before the season, and we're getting even more chaos than we anticipated. This is a game that if you would have asked me what's at stake on October 26th when Cincinnati heads out to Boulder to play Colorado, what's at stake? And I just said, I don't know. One of those coaches is hoping that he can keep his job with a win. That honestly, Bill, what I would have said. But instead, we're sitting here with 2 5-2 football teams. Cincinnati lost by a point to Pitt and 3 points at Texas Tech. They're coming off of a 10-point win over Arizona State. They've also beaten UCF this season. And then Colorado sitting here at 5-2 with a early season loss in Nebraska. Their most recent loss was a really competitive 3-point loss to Kansas State. And they are coming off of two of their last 3 games. They blew people out. They blew UCF out on the road and blew Arizona out on the road. They've actually played a lot better on the road this season outside of the Nebraska game than they have at home. Like, all their home games for the most part have been competitive. They barely beat North Dakota State at home. They barely beat Baylor at home, almost lost that game, and then lost to Kansas State. So now they're home against Cincinnati, who has played relatively well on the road as well. Bill, they're both 3-1 in the league. One of these teams is going to go into November essentially right in position to earn a spot in the Big 12 title game. And if Colorado wins this game, they're going to have an argument for jumping in the top 25. And that's going to make for a very interesting conversation because there's going to be some teams at the bottom of the top 25 that are going to lose this week. And Colorado, you look at the rest of their schedule, Bill, with at Texas Tech, home against Utah, at Kansas, home against Oklahoma State. They've got a shot to be a lot better this season than I thought that they were going to be. But this isn't a very important game because it has Big 12 title game implications. And I didn't think I would have said that about Cincinnati and Colorado.
Yeah, for both sides. I mean, Cincinnati hanging in there. That Pitt loss, they had a 3-score lead. Brendan Sorsby's playing well. Indiana transfer and playing very well for them, which has been a little bit of surprise, I think, in some ways. But they have a lot of veteran transfers. Scott Satterfield's a guy that's he picked the right guys out of the portal. So did Pitt. We have a feature about Pitt on our website today as they play Syracuse tonight. They picked the right guys, and it's working. Colorado's stats defy logic. How can you – they average 2.7 yards per carry. The only 4 schools that are worse, I did have to look this up today, are Florida State, UCLA, Akron, and Kent State. And Akron and Kent State in our 1-134 are in the bottom 10 teams in the country, not running game teams. So – how do you compensate that? Well, I guess you go 71% out of the air with Shador. Travis Hunter's status in doubt. I mean, I'm and as Bill Trocchi, my partner in our podcast, pointed out, he's like, their games aren't drawing like super high ratings. So that's probably the sign of progress in a weird way. That means that you're kind of doing your job under the radar and winning the games. Like, Deion is actually winning the games he should, and they should win this game at home.
They lost at home to Kansas State. I don't view that as a game they should have won.
No.
Kansas State's a much better football team than them, but they were competitive. That's the thing. Whereas last year they were not competitive in these games.
No.
If they win this game, Bill, that would put them at 6-2. And now all of a sudden, what you just said changes because they're going to jump on the media will jump on the bandwagon immediately that Colorado gets ranked. and let's say, let's ride that meal ticket again until it comes crashing down. And then we got more stories that we can talk about the crash. That's basically kind of how we do it. So this is going to be a very fascinating game. Do you have a prediction for this game, Bill?
I put 27-20 Colorado.
Yeah.
So exciting. Cincinnati can slow it down a little bit. But I think they hang in this game, and Colorado wins, and then they're 6-2. Then they're ranked 24 or 23. Iowa State's off this week. BYU, your favorite team, I know you love them. They have a tricky one. They have a tricky one this weekend. At UCF. I do think
never know what UCF is going to do, Bill.
I have no
idea.
Never know
what it's been. Gus Malzahn's MO since at Auburn. They'll look bad, beat Bama.
I have no idea on a week-to-week basis with them. So BYU loses, then you're starting to look. You're saying, well, it's Kansas State, Iowa State, and they play at the end of the year. Colorado's schedule is set up for success. Like they're set up for they might be able to make this happen. And, they play at Texas Tech. They have Utah. Utah hasn't looked good. At Boulder. Kansas, they should win that game. And that would set up. So picture what a ironic situation this would be. If Colorado was 9-2, final week of the season, Mike Gundy coming to them. Oklahoma State's had this horribly disappointed season, and they're playing spoiler against the Buffaloes. And a lot of people picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. I'm not sure if we did or not. I picked Kansas State in the preseason. It's mind-boggling to me. And a sign that, hey, Deion's got it going on. And notice he hasn't made viral, other than he called out Barack Obama last week, I believe. He hasn't made news for the wrong reasons or for critical reasons. So I didn't even click on the Barack Obama story because I don't think I cared.
I definitely don't care. The game they have a bye next week. The game in 2 weeks is to me going to be the game that if they win this one, that's going to say, okay, if they can get through that game at Lubbock, another sneaky 5-2 team in the Big 12, coming off that's another team. The Big 12, I can't figure these teams out, right? I mean, Texas Tech blows out a pretty good North Texas team, beat Cincinnati, beat Arizona, and then they get trounced at home by Baylor, who's not good. It's a weird year in the Big 12. That game's going to be big, Bill, because that's also two teams that only have one loss in the league. So it's going to be interesting. I have 27-17 Colorado. I actually did not get your pick. I forgot to ask your pick for the Texas Vandy game, Bill. I have 34-17 Texas.
I had the same score. I'm not joking. You can even, I believe you can go on, if you think I'm lying.
I don't believe
which I know you don't. If your listeners think I'm lying, you can go look at my weekly picks at Sporting News.
And after the week that I had last week, I don't know why you'd want to be
34-17 Texas,
That's
which
awesome.
is right under that 18-point line. We did. Yeah. So Alabama, it's tricky. I had to do this last week. So I'm very militant about my picks. I put them out on Monday. It's way too early in the week. I won't switch my Alabama-Missouri pick, even though I probably should. It's like last week. I should have added a touchdown to Notre Dame with Haynes King out.
Mm-hmm.
But with the quarterback out, I'm going to leave it. I'll let it ride. I put him up Monday. That's what you do. But I had Alabama winning by 13 points, like 34-21. Probably less than that. I would probably say it's like 27-20. Something like that, not because that's who they are. So those are those picks.
Let's get to this next game, Bill, before we get to our big games of the weekend. This is a very interesting game. Michigan State at Michigan. A game that before the season I would not have said is going to be, an overly intriguing game. I didn't expect either team to be very good, to be honest with you. I thought Michigan State would get a couple impressive victories because I think Jonathan Smith is one of the most underrated head coaches in college football. I think he's an outstanding head coach. And I thought Michigan wasn't going to be very good. Michigan's not very good. Michigan State's actually a little better than I thought they were going to be this season. And they're both 4-3. I believe they both have identical Big Ten records. But right now, the vibes around Michigan State are a whole lot better, even though they've lost 3 of their last 4 games, because they're coming off that really impressive win over Iowa. And Michigan right now is a team that is reeling a little bit. I'm watching the Michigan podcast yesterday, Bill, of a guy that I respect quite a bit, and he's just like assuming they're going to lose this game at home. You know, and I'm thinking, yeah, they did kind of lose to 2 decent teams the last 2 weeks. It's not like they went out and got beat by, Minnesota or something like that. Illinois is a pretty good football team, you know what I mean? But their offense is abysmal. It's just Michigan State's isn't a whole lot better, but I think what's got some of them spooked is how well the offense looked against Iowa last week.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen when you've got a really talented but really young quarterback. There's going to be some weeks where he just looks like $1 million, and that team is really good. And that's exactly what Childs looked like last week. Aiden Childs looked like last week, but they ran all over Iowa. That was the biggest shocker for me.
All right.
Is they went for over 200 against Iowa. Can they repeat that against Michigan? I don't know, Bill. This is going to be an interesting game. So I first want to ask you about the game, and then I have a follow-up about the ramifications of the game. But first, this is a big opportunity for a great, huge early win for Jonathan Smith, but a much-needed must-win scenario for not just the season, but the career of Sherrone Moore, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, their turnovers is the game. Michigan -7 turnover ratio. Haven't figured out quarterback. Their leading receiver, wide receiver, has barely over 100 yards this year. It's an embarrassing look for them in a lot of ways offensively. Quarterback shuffle hasn't worked. I mean, I'm at the point where I'm like, just throw Jaden Davis out there.
And if I'm Jaden Davis's dad, I'm like, no, you are not.
Yeah,
and
do
that to my son, right?
Right.
But you're correct.
I mean, but are we doing the red shirt? Are they waiting to play him for 3 games at the end of the season? Yeah, I mean, they are a mess, an abject mess. But Michigan State, yes, they played well last week and ran the football, but no, they're not a good team.
Right.
They're not there yet. Jonathan Smith can get them there. Aiden Childs turns the ball over a little bit. Michigan plays better at home. It's a rivalry game. This is basically the Super Bowl for both of them this year because they'll have something to hang their hat on. I mean, you asked, I can kind of tee up the ramifications this way. I mean, Michigan State loses, it's no big deal.
Right. It's part of the they just have to be competitive.
Yeah, they can't go, they've scored 7 points the last 2 years against Michigan in blowout losses, 29-7, 49 to the 29-7 game, of course, led to the tunnel mess at the end of the game. I don't think Michigan can lose this game. I think I wrote about that for us at Sporting News. The honeymoon part's over.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only going to get worse for Sherrone Moore if they lose here, because then you're staring at 5-7.
Yes, you might not make a bowl game, Bill.
If they win this game,
let me just give the schedule. Let's give the schedule. If they lose this game and they go to 4-4, they have Oregon at home next week. Then they play at Indiana, bye week, home against Northwestern, at Ohio State. They have a better shot of going 0-4 than they do 3-1 against that schedule.
Right.
Like if they lose this game, they might not go to a bowl game.
Right. They'll go 5-7, probably. I mean, I think they'll beat Northwestern no matter what, probably. And I think you and I are going to have some fun talking about predicting what the over-under is going to be for that game, Bill, because it's going to be – is this our first sub-20 over-under game that we ever see from a prediction standpoint? 7.
Exactly.
They played let me go look real quick. They played a really bad one with Brady Hoke and Pat Fitzgerald one year. And it was – let me see if it was 10 – I want to say it was 10-7 in overtime. Let me make sure.
Gosh.
It was – look, 10-9. 10-9 on November 8th, 2014. And I believe it was something to the effect of Northwestern may have gone for 2 to win the game, and Michigan stopped it. It was an ugly game. Devin Gardner was the quarterback. So, I just think Michigan wins, though. Mm-hmm. And they're not – and I know everybody's down. This is one of those don't react to whatever – yeah, they played a good football. They played horrible on offense. If they don't have 3 turnovers, they'll win the football game. If Michigan State doesn't have 1 or 2 turnovers, they'll win the football game. But there's some rivalry element to it. It'll be a lot of fun.
that's the thing is can Michigan State avoid turning the ball over? Because you've got an 18-year-old at quarterback.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, he is incredibly talented, but he's an 18-year-old kid. And you can't expect him to play like I'll say this, if he plays like they did last week, and honestly, if the offensive line plays like they did last week, they will win this game. They will. I just don't think you can ask him to do that in consecutive games because of just who they're playing. I mean, he's a kid that's got 6 touchdowns on the season, passing, 3 rushing. He's also got 9 interceptions. He's had 3 games so far with multiple interceptions. Incredibly talented young man, but he's 18 years old. He's a redshirt freshman, and he's 18 years old. So I love this kid. I mean, he is going to, in my opinion, will be the best quarterback in the Big Ten at some point in time in the future. Love this kid's talent. I don't know if this is the year. Look, because you can talk about struggles and all that, but Bill, sometimes you just got to say it's a rivalry game. You got to put all that stuff aside. You're going to get the best from these 2 football teams. You will. The question is can Michigan make enough plays on offense to win a 20-17 game?
Okay.
That's going to be the question.
And you called this a couple weeks ago. Michigan State's pretty good up front. They're getting a little bit of a participation trophy for Oregon and Ohio State, even though they weren't really competitive in those games.
They were competitive in how they played.
Right.
They weren't competitive in regard to outcome. And I think that's what
right.
that's what I saw, and that's what I like. Because I said that before, it won't be a close game, but for the first quarter and a half, they're going to compete with Ohio State and compete with Oregon, and but they don't have the horses to go score. The problem is Michigan doesn't have the offense to put them away like those teams did.
And this is the best defensive line they will have faced to this. Yeah. I still
Ohio State's defensive line is not played like they should.
Yeah, and then Oregon's pretty good up front, but Michigan can disrupt there. They might not have Will Johnson. They might. That's become an every week thing at this point. I just, you're starting to see with Michigan what you used to see with the Baltimore Ravens of the offense is starting to stress out a really good defense. And that defense is feeling a little bit of pressure to play perfect. Illinois could have had a lot more points. Michigan really defense stopped the bleeding. But I think the Michigan defense, I had it at, what did I have it at? It's not, I don't have it at a very high score. I can tell you that. 20-16 Michigan.
Okay. We're actually close, Bill. I have it 24-16 Michigan State.
Yep. So, I mean, and I can either
I think they pull off the ups. I just think with the issues with Will Johnson, with their secondary problems, I think their offensive line can create enough opportunities for Aiden Childs to just hit a couple plays. And I also think part of this too, Bill, is I think Michigan's going to have a bad turnover or two that's going to give them a 30-yard field. And that's what it's going to come down to for me. That's how I see it. I think this, because the worst thing to happen to Michigan was this young, their best receiver, I think, is a true freshman, like Nicholas Marsh. I think it's a true freshman as well. Last thing you wanted to do is give this young team confidence. And that's what that Iowa win was, because it wasn't fluky. They had almost 500 yards of offense.
Right.
And that's a pretty good defense. So I'm going Michigan State. Michigan's can Sharon Moore, if I'm right, and Michigan State wins, Sharon Moore's probably got at least 2 more bad losses on. I mean, between Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State, 2 of them are going to be bad losses, meaning like it's going to get ugly.
Right.
In my opinion. Can he recover from that? I mean, we get to the point sometimes, Bill, where you have such a season that is bad enough to where I don't know that you can recover from that. Like Charlie Weiss could never recover from his 2007 season, just could never recover from it. And, I'm very curious about this.
No, I mean, he'll be the honeymoon. I think there'll be so much urgency on next year. They're willing to give him one big mulligan season. Say, okay, you lost all these guys. Stuart Mandel wrote an interesting piece this week. I tend to agree with that. You need to break free from Harbaugh and because he can't be Harbaugh, which there's some of that. That's going to be one of those things. So, I think it's definitely worth watching. And I don't know. I just think next year would be so much pressure. Who's the quarterback? Number one, you got to answer that. Is it Jaden Davis?
He's currently playing for someone else.
I think that's what he's getting roasted for most, Brian, is that he didn't go to the portal.
Right.
And all three doors so far at quarterback. And I'll be the first one to admit, you and I, we said there, okay, go to Alex Orji. He didn't work. And then
it didn't work because they didn't commit to him the way they needed to commit to him with how they structure the offense.
Completely fair. And then the other one was, okay, go to Tuttle. Let's see what Tuttle can do. Pretty sure Tuttle can't get through a quarter without turning the ball over. So now we're back to go back to Orji. Do what Navy and Army do. Just run it with Mullins and Edwards.
Listen, Michigan, do yourselves a favor. Go watch the 2017 Notre Dame team.
Yeah.
And do what they did. They went 10-3 and had 4 wins over top 20 teams that year. And I think all of them were double-digit wins. And they had a quarterback that completed 49% of his passes. Like, that's your only hope. But they're trying to still run their offense with quarterbacks who can't run the offense. That's the problem. And I think it's because they made a really bad hire at all. He's going to have to, if he's going to save his job, he's going to have to make some big changes this offseason. Right. He's going to have to. Yeah. Let's get into the 2 big games, Bill. And we'll start off with this matchup between Penn State and Wisconsin. If you'd have asked me 3 weeks ago about this game, I'd have said, I do not care. Wisconsin stinks. They're not any good. I don't know why they went away from what they're trying to do offensively, choked away that USC game, didn't look very good against Western Michigan, look very good against South Dakota. They're not very good, Bill. They're not very good. They blew a 21-3 lead against USC. They stink. Since then, they beat Purdue 52-6, beat Rutgers on the road 42-7, beat Northwestern on the road 23-3. And they have gone back to what they should have done, and I think they're trying to rectify the biggest mistake that Luke Fickell made, which was hiring a guy to run an air raid offense when you are Wisconsin. And in the last 3 games, they ran for 106 yards against USC. It's embarrassing. Since then, Bill, they've gone for 228, 309, and 199. They're getting back to being that team and they're on a roll. Penn State, obviously on a roll as well, Bill. This is a much more intriguing game than I thought it would have been a couple weeks ago. It's a 6.5-point spread. It's going to be 7:30. It's a night game on NBC, over under 47.5. Talk to me about this game, Bill. Is this a game you think Wisconsin might have a shot to pull off an upset? I mean, Penn State's looked good, but they haven't been necessarily dominating teams. You know what I mean?
It's the Camp Randall Knight spot that, we always hear about, but they are 2-13 against top 25 teams in their last 15 games. It's not good. I've tried to convince Bill Trocchi that, at least in the last 5 to 6 years, that Camp Randall's a little bit of a myth. You can't say it can be a tough place to play in theory, but in execution, to me, it's not a tough place to play if other teams can walk in there and win.
They lost 3 of their last 4 home games last year, Bill. I'm just giving you some data to back up your point.
They lost to
Iowa at home.
Yeah.
They lost to Ohio State at home. They lost to Northwestern at home by 2 touchdowns, and their only win was an overtime win over a not very good Nebraska team.
So having drunk kids in the stands and playing jump around doesn't make it a tough place to play.
Right.
Winning and having the reputation of knocking off teams makes it a tough place to play. And then you look at, so I went back, they are 1-7 against top 5 teams in the college football playoff era since 2014.
What's their win?
You're going to love this. So 2016 Lambeau Field. You got it now? LSU. They beat an LSU. They beat an 16-14. They beat LSU.
It's a Leonard Fournette team, right?
Correct.
That was his last year with LSU. Yeah, I remember that now.
Brutally bad LSU team. Now, granted, those 7 losses, you're talking about Michigan in 2016 at Michigan, Alabama on a neutral site field, and 5 losses to the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Okay,
so I mean, it's not like we're like, I want to be clear, this stat is skewed, and some of two of those Ohio State losses were 1-score games, but yeah, this. Can you stand up and win one at home? This would be a signature victory for Luke Fickell. It would show that the last 3 weeks aren't just picking on other teams. And Penn State's in a weird spot. I don't know if you saw the story yesterday. Did you see about the former players that have been charged.
Not the first time this has happened for a James Franklin coach.
But the press conference was brutal. Aubrey Snyder with The Athletic asked a question.
Such a bad look.
Just say, I can't comment on the investigation. James Franklin steps away. Spokesman comes back in. Basically, for our listeners who don't know, they had 2 players, former players, who are being charged with, rape and sexual assault. That's a very serious thing. Yeah. And his way of doing it, instead of just saying, Aubrey, I appreciate the question, but we can't comment on legal matters at this time. So easy. It's too
I've been advised by the school. I'd love to talk to you about it, but
he can repeat that. Yeah. He can repeat that, and you might get a little bit hammered for that, but you're getting hammered.
Look, Bill, it looks so much worse when he steps away like a coward and lets somebody else come, step in and answer that. Like, dude, like you said, I can't comment on it. I've been advised by our attorney. It's a pending legal matter. I can't comment on it publicly. You know what I mean? We've issued our statement, but it was such a bad look. Such a bad look. So that's one of 2 potential distractions that Penn State could have, Bill. The other potential distraction is what's coming down the road. What's happening next weekend?
Well, they play a team from Columbus.
Correct.
And is that what they do? It's a noon game, which is ridiculous, by the way. So to give you a hint,
noon game on Fox.
So the next 2 weekends I will be in Canton. I'll be off working from the hotel room. My daughter has a lacrosse tournament on Sunday. They did not have the good sense to schedule my son and daughter's lacrosse tournament in Canton on the same weekend. So I got to go back up to Canton. I'll probably be watching Grant during the Ohio State-Penn State game. So, hey, thank you, Fubo TV. I'll be watching you too. So I'm looking ahead to that too, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's Thursday. I'm sure you are, Archer 452, looking glad that it's at noon, because that means it's not at night. But you know what? Not that matters for Penn State. They're the ones that are going to be on. They have to win that game, from a perception standpoint. But all the peeking ahead, still think Penn State's better football team this weekend.
Okay.
Running game, Drew Aller, defense. They've answered every challenge so far. Tyler Warren's pretty good. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe I'm leaning on you here.
No, I mean, Bill, I've been back and forth on this one all week, because when I watch Penn State, there's a lot of things they do that I like. There is. I mean, their offense, it's like one week their pass game rolls and their run game struggles, and then the next week their run game doesn't go well and their pass game bails them out. Like, they didn't run the ball very well against USC, but they were able to make some plays in the passing game. But that was a I don't say it was a well-earned win, but kind of an ugly win, and you keep waiting on them to turn it on, Bill. It's like, well, okay, they were looking, Bowling Green, they overlooked Bowling Green. Okay. Illinois, is at home. It was that's a good, okay, fine. Didn't look great at home against UCLA, went on the road against USC. Part of that was Penn State battling, and part of that was USC kind of choking the game away, if we're being honest, with some just terrible plays from the offense. I have not been as impressed with this Penn State team as I thought I would in a lot of ways, but I also respect the fact that they just keep winning. They just keep finding ways to win. I just feel like, Bill, this particular matchup, Wisconsin's hot. They're running the ball effectively. This game is going to come down to can Wisconsin find some ways to make plays in the throwing game. USC is the only team that has run the ball effectively at all on Penn State. And that was mainly because I felt Penn State was just so geared towards stopping the passing game that they kind of gave up some runs. They were willing to kind of give up some of those runs early. Can Wisconsin run the ball when Penn State knows they're going to run the ball? That's the question. That's the matchup. I actually think Wisconsin's going to be able to do a couple things in this game. I think this is going to be a hard-fought game. I'm actually kind of in upset mode this week, Bill. I'm going to be honest with you. I actually like Wisconsin in this game. I think the distraction of this situation, which is former teammates of these players, the fact that they haven't really looked great in really a month, if we're being honest, and the fact that next week is Ohio State. I think that's enough. And James Franklin every year has that one big game that his team just doesn't show up for. Last year was Michigan and Ohio State. They were outclassed in both of those games. Wisconsin is not that. But I wonder if the environment and all those type of things is going to make us remember, oh, that's right, James Franklin's still their head football coach.
Correct.
That's what I'm banking on, Bill. So I'm actually going Wisconsin 31, Penn State 28. That's where I'm going. I'm pulling off the upset.
I had it right here. 27-14 Penn State.
Okay.
7
Which
points.
is kind of right in line with what they've done.
Yeah, like
most teams this year.
ugly. I think their defense is better than I want to give it credit for. I think their
defense is solid. Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
And then it's going to push into – now, the last time they went to Madison, they won by 6 points, and they needed 2 Jaquan Brisker interceptions to do it. So I'm going to go 27-14. I don't mind your upset pick, though. Like, I'm not, like, phased by it. Like, oh, Brian, you're just taking a huge shot there. I really think could happen. But
Bill, 2-3 weeks ago, I would have predicted Penn State to win by 17.
Right.
Honestly, I would have. I was like, this Wisconsin team did not impress me at all. But they have. It's like in the last 3 teams they've beat aren't very good.
Right.
But they're doing to those teams what good teams are supposed to do to inferior opponents, and that is like my eyes got opened up watching them against Rutgers. I was like, whoa, this is like an old school Wisconsin team. They're running the ball. Their quarterback looks like some kid who shouldn't even be on scholarship. Because remember, they went like a decade without a quarterback that looked like he could start for anyone else in the Big Ten, and they just kept going to the Big Ten title game every other year with those quarterbacks. You know what I mean? That's what they look like, and they're playing gritty defense. I mean, their defense the last few weeks has been really good. It really has, and that's been probably the biggest surprise for me is how much improved their defense has been since that USC game. Now, again, you say, well, yeah, Purdue sucks, but Purdue's offenses looked pretty good against Illinois the next week, and I thought they moved the ball more effectively against Oregon than they did against Nebraska. Against Wisconsin. So I like this upset. I think the distractions, Penn State's just can they have 2 weeks in a row where they've got to come back and win? I don't know. I'm going with the upset. Let's get to this last game, Bill. And this is the big game of the weekend. You've got number 8 LSU playing on the road against number 14 Texas A&M. Obviously, this is a game that means a lot for Notre Dame in a lot of different ways. A&M is a 2.5-point favorite. So not the first time this year that A&M has been a lower-ranked home team that is favored to beat a top 10 opponent. Last time, Notre Dame beat them 23-13 in a game that was a lot more competitive than the final score of 10 points, right? LSU coming off of a very impressive road win against Arkansas. And now no looking past Arkansas to A&M, Bill. This is a huge game. Both teams undefeated in the league. And because I think these are actually the last 2 undefeated teams in league play, correct?
They are. And
so talk to me about this game, Bill. What do you see? What are you thinking? Let's have this conversation about the LSU Tigers and the
somebody bust the trend of the home team always wins. 7 straight games the home team has won in this series. Excellent series. I wouldn't have guessed this until I looked it up earlier today. Texas A&M is the more penalized team. I would have just guessed watching them and eyeballing them when have them on Saturdays. I thought LSU would be the more penalized team here. Very intrigued by Caden Durham last week. We'll say this about LSU. Talked a lot about Fayetteville and made a big joke of it last week. But what did they do? They went in there and took care of business. 34-10. Caden Durham, 3 touchdowns, 20 carries. They actually ran the football with some success. If they can do that here on the road where it's loud, I think they'll walk away with the win. Garrett Nussmeier has to have a good game. I don't know. It comes down to this, Brian. How much do you trust Connor Wegman? You've saw him against Notre Dame. You've seen him come back. He's been better since he came back from the injury. These 2 teams are very fitting their playing because they're very similar.
Mm-hmm. You nailed the key right there, Bill, is can they run the football? That's going to be the key. If this is a game where Garrett Nussmeier has to carry the offense by dropping back a bunch, I don't know that they're going to be able to make enough plays to win this game. That to me is going to be a huge part of this game. And look, you could say, well, trend is the home team wins. in both of Brian Kelly's 2 years, A&M has battled LSU. They smacked them 2 years ago in College Station. This is a way better team than that. And last year, even though A&M pulled ahead 42-30, that was a competitive game for a while with A&M playing a lot of backups because they were pretty banged up, right? And so it was I think the last game of Jaden Daniels' career at Texas A&M. But then the same thing was true against Arkansas, and they went out last week and pummeled Arkansas after back-to-back years where Arkansas gave them a game. So it really is going to come down to, can LSU run the football, and can Texas A&M run the football? I mean, I think because neither one of these quarterbacks, in my opinion, are guys that I want putting a team on its shoulders and just carrying them to victory. Now, I know that Gus Nussmeier's had a couple of them, but I don't think Nussmeier is going to be able to throw the picks that he threw against LSU or against Ole Miss.
He will not.
And beat Texas A&M. And this Texas A&M defensive line is playing at a very high level right now. And that's going to be really the key. So, I felt like last week LSU did a great job of being locked in on the opponent in front of them because that opponent had challenged them so much, where I felt like A&M was kind of sleepwalking a little bit through that game because MSU sucks, thinking about this upcoming game against LSU. This is a bounce-back game. This is a huge opportunity for Mike Elko against his former boss, Brian Kelly, which is another intriguing kind of side story in this game, is Brian Kelly going up against one of his disciples. I don't know that he's ever had a game where he's gone up against one of his former coaches.
It makes it intriguing. And
yeah.
Mike Elko is...
Oh, Chuck Martin, 2017. Sorry.
Miami of Ohio, correct?
Yeah. Yep, 17, yep.
So he came in, and that was a decent game.
No, 52-10.
Maybe not a decent game.
Yeah.
Miami
of Ohio wasn't very good that year.
Has Miami played them close recently?
Played Notre Dame close?
Yes.
You're thinking of Ball State.
That's who I'm thinking.
Yeah, 2018 was 24-16.
That's the one. And Toledo.
Yeah, that's 2021. Yes. Yep.
And another MAC team. We won't talk about that one.
Just you shut your dirty mouth.
I stopped myself. So I'm like,
we're talking about Brian Kelly, okay?
When are they going to play the Bobcats, man? When are the Bobcats? I would come up for that.
Notre Dame should never play another MAC team ever, and not
play the Bobbies
ever.
So anyway, yeah, so a couple predicting the futures here. If Texas A&M wins, we start to point toward the Texas matchup, which to me is starting to shape up as the most intriguing matchup on rivalry weekend. Peeking ahead, they haven't seen each other. They hate each other. I always tell people, I've been around every rivalry in this country. There's not two fan bases that hate each other more than Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah, like genuine, like
personal opinion. It's a personal thing.
Yes,
like I don't like you because you are Texas. Right. It's borderline. It's weird. I mean, and it's evidenced by they would take shots at each other for 10 years on social media and they weren't even playing. So I'm glad they get to settle it on the field. Two, if LSU wins, they get a bye week, they get Alabama. Think of the opportunities for Brian Kelly there. It's Barry, Alabama. It's the lane is wide open for you to get to the SEC championship game. And
you'd have to get upset.
Yeah, you'd have to lose somewhere.
Yeah.
And you were a drive away from beating USC where you pounded the table afterward. They would be like number one.
Yeah.
Number one-ish. So
yeah, they're definitely in the top two,
right? Yeah.
Maybe, I think if they're undefeated, they're probably ahead of Georgia. So, even if Oregon's number one, because Oregon would have that win over Ohio State, let's just say that. They're definitely ahead of Georgia, in my opinion. They're not going to have a one-loss SEC team ahead of an undefeated SEC team.
So, to your point, though, they have a little bit of a rabbit's foot in their pocket right now, right? That they beat Ole Miss, maybe got away with that one, and they're sitting here with this opportunity, and I think they're going to take it.
Oh,
and
wow.
I don't go through the trends often, but I've got LSU winning 31-28.
Wow. You think they can score 31 in this defense?
I think they can get up and down a little bit, and it gets well. I mean, as Bill pointed out, when they played that 74-72 game, great
24-24 at the end of half of regulation.
31-31.
31-31.
I guessed 41-41. So it was like they play some weird games with these guys. So I could see a couple blown assignments, maybe a block punt. You always ask me, how do I see it playing out? I think LSU rallies in the fourth quarter and somehow wins.
I think if LSU is going to win, they're going to have to jump on A&M early.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because again, the comeback against Ole Miss happened at home, and LSU's been a little bit of a different. Like right now, if you look at LSUville, the Arkansas game is a bit of an anomaly for them away from home. They don't play as well away from home. They haven't in a while. Obviously you have the loss last year. They lost to Bama last year on the road. They barely beat Missouri last year on the road. They lost to Ole Miss last year on the road. They lost to Florida State away from home. They don't play well away from home. Is the Arkansas game a beginning of things to come? We'll see. Here's been the thing that's been trending well for them, Bill. Their defense is much improved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Baker's done a phenomenal job getting a defense that does not have a lot of talent going. I'm going with the fact that they haven't looked good away from home. I do think Texas A&M was a little bit of a looking past situation, looking past them, to looking past Mississippi State, in my opinion, to kind of get ready for this game. I think Texas A&M wins this one, Bill. I do. I like this football team. I think they're playing really good defense. I think they're going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. There's not a lot of teams that can get pressure against that offensive line. Ole Miss did a pretty good job of it. I think A&M has an even better front than Ole Miss, in my opinion, as a unit. And so I think they're going to be able to run the ball somewhat effectively on LSU. I think LSU is going to become one-dimensional, and they're not going to be able to run the ball on Texas A&M. And then if it's close and late in the game, then I think A&M wins. I got 24-21 Aggies.
So we both have it.
We see the game being somewhat played comparably. I just think if it gets into a close fourth quarter game, the home team will win this one. Right? If they don't, then I think A&M's going to have to jump out early and then hold on is what I think they're going to have to do, in my opinion. Because I don't know if they can run on them in the fourth quarter the way that Notre Dame did.
Right.
That's the difference. So, Bill, great week of games. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they're going to play out. We both agree on Texas Vandy. We both had Colorado winning. We split on Michigan State, and we split on LSU, Texas A&M. So we're going to see how this thing goes, man. But thanks for joining me. I know you got to run. You and I'll be back next week. There's going to be some big games for us to discuss next week, my friend. And it's going to be kind of the theme here moving forward these next few weeks because there's so many good games.
We're running out of weeks, and I do appreciate you having me on as always.
Yeah. Bill, before you get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm at Bill Bender 92 at sportingnews.com. Can I get a quick Pitt Syracuse pick from you?
Of course.
I got Pitt winning a close one, 31-27 tonight.
You think Pitt's going to stay undefeated, huh?
7-0.
All right. I actually agree with that. I think that they're going to win 30-27. If it was at Syracuse, I'd like Syracuse. I think Syracuse can win this game. They do. There's no doubt. It's just going to be, can they protect Kyle McCord? If they can protect Kyle McCord, then I think they can win this game. I don't think they're going to be able to protect Kyle McCord, which is why I'm going with Pitt. But if Kyle McCord gets rolling early, I think Syracuse can win. I actually think Syracuse could win convincingly if they can protect Kyle McCord. I just don't know that they're going to be able to do that.
It'll be fun. Old Big East battle tonight. I got Pitt, and then we had a long feature with Pat Narduzzi. Bill had a story about Arch and Quinn. And
a great, hugely important Mountain West game tomorrow night as well, Bill. Boise State at UNLV. Pair of one-loss teams.
Two 40-plus offenses.
That's right. Only loss from UNLV at home to Syracuse.
Jackson Woodard and Ashton Genty. That's must-see TV. It'll be a lot of fun.
It is. Yes,
but that's all at the sporting news this week, and we'll get it going next week.
And can Nebraska not suffer a second blowout? That's going to be another interesting one.
I don't know.
We'll see. So, Bill, thanks so much for joining me, man. I appreciate you as always. I'll give you some updates this weekend while you're at the game. Let you know how things are going.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So Bill Bender, folks, find him at Sporting News. You love his content, does a great job. He's getting ready to leave. He's you got a big Hall of Famer interview coming up here today.
Am I supposed to answer this question about the Halloween costume?
Oh, yeah.
Before I go?
Go if you want, from Pete Weber, super chat. Thanks, Pete. Brian and Bill, what are you going to be for Halloween this year? And if you don't have one planned, what would it be? I'm the Intimidator, Dale Senior.
Real quick, and I can do this quickly. Grant, my son, last year, Grant was Rick Vaughn, because we're in Ohio. Okay. It was perfect.
Sure.
And my daughter was one of the mean girls. I forget which one. I already forget. The one, Regina, maybe. Somebody can help me on the chat. I don't know. And then when I was a senior in high school, I was Yoda, but I because I'm competitive, I put there was a girl in my class. I borrowed her volleyball knee pads and put them on and like had a stick and was going through the hallway like Yoda, like walking like Yoda, and my knees hurt like heck after the game or after the day. But I won the costume contest in high school, and I still have. I'll dig up that picture for you, Brian. You're going to be like, "What's wrong with this guy?"
I'm just annoyed that Mean Girls has now made a second appearance on the Irish Breakdown show this month. What is going on?
Regina George, that's it. Pete Weber with the assist there. I appreciate it. That was she was Regina George. I'm not quite sure what they are going to be this year. I should probably go investigate that.
What are you going to be, Bill? I don't dress up for Halloween.
I don't not as much anymore. I don't. We have like a hot dog costume around here that I put on one year, but like I haven't done it in a while. I will say this, as an October-born kid that loves the fall season, I do love Halloween. I love seeing costumes, love giving kids, when they stop by, love seeing their costumes, seeing what they're doing, and love, pushing my kids to get more candy to put in the fridge. Sure. So when I'm up covering these games late at night, they get very upset. Sorry to put that on. That we could probably go on for 20 more minutes about Halloween, but I'm sorry to spin that out of control.
Yeah. So I will be dressing up like a middle class guy in the suburbs who is a Notre Dame fan.
You better be nice and give the kids, a Snickers bar or whatever.
Yeah. I got to remember when that is, because last year we missed it, and all of a sudden these kids are knocking on our door. We're like, we don't have anything. So we had to hide downstairs. We felt bad. So I may actually have to go do that now so I don't forget. So Bill Bender, everybody, thanks so much, Bill, for joining me, man. I can't wait till we get to have this conversation again next week. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Check out the shows that Bill's doing for CFB All-America. You can find that at the CFB Nation podcast platform. Wherever you watch podcasts, type in CFB, college football, CFB Nation, and you'll see Bill's latest show. It's also where you can find the Lucky Lefty podcast as well. So, Bill, thanks for being with me, man. Talk to you again here soon. Hopefully, we'll be talking about a Notre Dame victory, and very curious. We'll have to talk about the Michigan State game post-game next week as well when we kick things off. So we'll have plenty to talk about next week. So have a great rest of your day, everybody, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow, 1 o'clock for the Irish Breakdown mailbag. I have to have Bill on a mailbag one of these days. That'd be a lot of fun. We'll have to do that maybe in the postseason, Bill, or the offseason. We'll have you do a Friday mailbag. That'd be a blast. So
anytime.
Take care, everybody. Talk to you again soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.